Chapter 1007. After turning the corner of the hillside, there was a nearly vertical cliff about 30 meters in front of him. It was about 500 meters high, and it almost occupied the other side of the mountain. It gave people the feeling that the front of the mountain was normal, but the back of the mountain had been split open by some god with a giant axe. The power of nature was always awe-inspiring. Charlotte walked quickly towards the cliff, observing it as he walked. He found that the surface of the cliff was very smooth, and there were very few protruding places, and there were very few cracks. Even a professional rock climber would not be able to climb up such a steep and smooth cliff without professional aids. When he arrived at the foot of the cliff, Charlotte moved his gaze to the ground. He quickly found a new clue. At the beginning of the cliff, there were 3 stacked stones, 2 at the bottom and 1 at the top, looking like a triangle. Dad Xia Changhe first left a hidden zhuo bai at the entrance of the cave, and here there was a triangle formed by the stones. This hint was obvious enough. There was a hidden entrance on top of the cliff. This secret was probably not known by the man with the king cobra tattoo. Akiko, Tsukino, and Saimu also raised their heads to look at the cliff above. "Boss, you're not going to tell me that there's an entrance up here, are you?" Saimu said. "Yes. There's an entrance up here," Charlotte said. His gaze quickly searched the cliff, looking for the exact location of the entrance. "Boss, you've never been here before. How do you know there's an entrance up here?" Akiko Tsukino asked curiously. Charlotte said, "My dad told me. Did you see the lines on the stone just now? That was the clue he left for me. I remember now. I did see some lines on a stone, but I thought it was just some bored kids carving, but you actually found a clue from those lines. How did you do it?" Simon was also very curious. He had always been proud of his observation skills, but he found that his observation skills were simply too weak in front of Charlotte. "Just observe carefully," Charlotte said. He quickly ended his search, and the results of his search made him depressed. He had used all the abilities of his left eye, but be it the telescopic, X-ray, or microvision abilities, he could not see any obvious entrance. The biggest crack on the rock wall could probably fit a snake. It was obviously not an entrance that a human could enter. Charlotte furrowed his brows and thought to himself, could it be that father left behind some message? "Boss, why don't I climb up and take a look? We can't see what's going on up there from below," Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte said, "Don't worry. This rock wall is extremely difficult to climb. If you don't find the right position, it's very likely that you'll climb in vain, and it's very dangerous. Then, let's keep looking." Akiko Tsukino glared at Saimu. "Why are you still standing there? Let's split up, and each person will be in charge of one place." "Okay, no problem." Saimu walked to the other side of the rock wall. Akiko Tsukino followed Saimu, but when she walked to the middle of the rock wall, she stopped. Charlotte's gaze once again fell on the triangle formed by the 3 stones. This time, he used his X-ray ability. It was also this time that he found that the stone above him was also engraved with messy lines. Sure enough, father had left another message. Charlotte ended his X-ray ability. He first picked up the stone and looked at it. Yes, the method he used just now was analyzed, eliminated, and reorganized. A minute later, he got new content. This time, it wasn't the content of Chinese characters, but the content of numbers, 369, 225. His father didn't just casually leave behind this information. He knew that Xia Lei had the ability to see through things, so he left the information here openly. In the eyes of others, it was just a bunch of messy lines, but he knew that Charlotte could get rid of the hidden information. But the question was, what did the 2 sets of numbers he left represent? Charlotte suddenly raised his head, and his vision quickly completed the measurement of the entire rock wall. This rock wall was 539 meters high and 428 meters wide. After completing the measurement, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. The 2 sets of numbers left by father represented the height, and the other represented the width. The place where the 2 met was the entrance. Charlotte walked quickly to Akiko Tsukino, who was standing in the middle of the rock wall. "Boss, did you find anything?" Akiko Tsukino asked. Charlotte didn't speak. He directly walked over Akiko Tsukino and stopped about 50 meters away from her. He said loudly, "Here, I found it." Akiko, Tsukino, and Sayemu followed him. Charlotte looked up at the rock wall above his head. It's 369 meters at this time of night. Sayemu then took out a telescope from his equipment bag. He looked at it for a while and then said, "Boss, you're probably mistaken. This telescope of mine can measure distance. There's nothing at the position you're talking about, just a shiny rock wall." The place that Sayemu observed with the telescope, Charlotte had actually already observed it. At a height of 369 meters, it was indeed a smooth rock wall. But for some reason, he had a strong hunch that there must be some secret hidden there. It might be a mechanism, or it might be a camouflage. But no matter what it was, Father couldn't have left those two sets of numbers for no reason. He must have left those two sets of numbers for a reason. "I'll go up and have a look." Akiko Tsukino didn't ask as many questions as Sayemu. Charlotte said that the entrance was there, so she wanted to climb up and prove it to Charlotte. Charlotte said, "Let me do it." Akiko Tsukino said, "There may be a cliff in this world that I'm not afraid of, but it's definitely not the one in front of me." She didn't even bother to take off her equipment bag. She just took out a pair of special gloves with spikes from the equipment bag, then jumped and lightly stuck to the rock wall. The pair of gloves should be a climbing tool used by ninjas. "Be careful." Charlotte didn't expect her to be so anxious and couldn't help but exhort. Akiko Tsukino looked back at Charlotte and smiled, then climbed up. Her speed was very fast, like a gecko sticking to the wall. She crawled on the rock wall, looking very dangerous, but in fact, she was very stable. In a few minutes, Akiko Tsukino climbed to a height of tens of meters. In Sayamu's eyes, she was equivalent to a person on the 7th or 8th floor, but in Charlotte's eyes, she was just a person in front of him. He could clearly see how her hands, feet, and waist coordinated to exert force. But he could also see her full but swaying on the rock wall. "Boss, she likes you," Sayemu said. Charlotte smiled bitterly. "It's you who likes her, right?" "Yes, I don't deny that I really like her, but she never likes me." Sayemu sighed. "A woman's mind is very difficult to understand, but I know that most women like you. I'm not." "Don't make trouble," Charlotte said. "Hee hee, I won't be jealous. In our place, I can legitimately marry a few wives. You gave me so much money, I don't want to lose out in this regard. Sayemu wanted to say something, but stopped. "You just what?" "We are all orphans. Growing up, we have lived in human lives. This kind of life can't last a lifetime. If possible, boss, let her live a normal life." Sayemu said, "Loving someone doesn't necessarily mean having her. As long as she lives well, seeing her happy, that is also a kind of happiness." Charlotte was silent for a moment, then said, "All things have an end. Our lives are no exception. You can rest assured, after everything is settled, I will let you live an ordinary and happy life, which is the normal life you said." "Boss, I don't think you understand what I mean," Sayemu said. At this time, Akiko Tsukino's voice suddenly came from above. "Boss, help me see if I'm at the place you said I was." Sayemu then picked up his binoculars that can measure distance. However, Siale only took a glance and said in a loud voice, "Another 50 meters up." "Okay." Akiko Tsukino continued to climb up. Sayemu put down the binoculars with a face full of surprise. "Boss, I just measured. It really is 50 meters, but how did you—" "Observe, and also use shadows and reference object to calculate the approximate correct result." Charlotte said it very profoundly, but in fact, he only used his telescopic ability. In the blink of an eye, he accurately calculated the distance to the centimeter. However, he didn't say how many centimeters. If he did, then he wouldn't be able to fool Sayemu. Chapter 1008. There is no sound of an opening, which meant that the rock was solid and there was no space behind it. There were almost no cracks around, and there were no traps or anything like that. However, this place was the place that his father, Xia Changhe, had indicated, the intersection of 369 and 225. Judging from the current situation, it was normal for Akiko Tsukino to think that Charlotte had misinterpreted it. But did Charlotte really misinterpret it? After a minute of X-ray vision, Charlotte pulled out a military knife and then crawled along the rock wall. He grabbed the rope that Akiko Tsukino had fixed to the rock, and as he crawled, he scratched the rock with the military knife. Akiko Tsukino was surprised to find that the marks that Charlotte had drawn were like marks made by a knife on the soil. They were very deep, and the edges of the scratches looked like saw teeth. Under normal circumstances, it was obviously impossible for a military knife to leave a deep scratch on a hard rock, let alone a sawtooth scratch. When Charlotte stopped, he had already drawn a circle with a diameter of about 1 meter on the surface of the rock. After he finished drawing, he suddenly stabbed the military knife into the rock. Crack! The sharp military knife stabbed into the center of the circle like a radish. Akiko Tsukino moved towards Charlotte, and she grabbed his stone chip on the crack. She was dumbfounded when she saw it. It was not a stone chip at all, but wax. Someone had used wax to seal the entrance, and the wax had been made into the color of the rock and even had a texture. She didn't know who made this wax ball and when it was placed here, but she was sure that it had experienced a long time, and it was not ordinary wax. It was specially made, otherwise it would have been weathered by the wind and the sun, and it would not have lasted until now. Charlotte also had a question in his mind, and that was, how did his father know about this entrance? Boss, you can easily see a girl's underwear, right? Akiko Tsukino suddenly said. Huh? Charlotte pretended to be surprised. Since you were able to discover such a hidden entrance, it shouldn't be a problem for you to discover the color of a girl's underwear. Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte was stunned. He wondered if Akiko Tsukino knew the secret of his X-ray vision. He had only told this secret to his father, Xia Changhe, and no one else. If Akiko Tsukino knew this secret, the only way to get it was from his father. But why did Papa tell Akiko Tsukino this secret? There was no need for that at all. Akiko Tsukino suddenly laughed. Boss, I'm just joking with you. What's with your expression? She actually played such a joke on him. Charlotte secretly breathed a sigh of relief, but a smile appeared on his face. I'm guessing the color of your underwear. Black, right? Is it lace? In his line of sight, Akiko Tsukino's trousers had disappeared, and all that was left was the crucial fabric. However, it wasn't black lace, but white-combed cotton underwear without flowers. It was very thin, and it couldn't hide the mysterious and mature scenery. It felt like a hazy style of a landscape painter's painting of a hill or something. There was also a bit of fog, grass, streams, and so on. It allowed people to use their endless imagination. Akiko Tsukino's face suddenly turned red, and then she said, perverted. Charlotte laughed and said, I guessed it right? Well, how can we open it? Akiko Tsukino had no choice but to change the topic. She made a joke, but this joke put her in an awkward situation. Charlotte said, it's very simple. Just kill it. He pulled out a Viper pistol with a silencer from his waist, and then fired at the wax ball disguised as a rock. Akiko Tsukino also took out a Viper pistol and fired the wax ball. Wax was most afraid of high temperatures, and its structure was also hard and fragile. The temperature of the bullet was extremely high, and the impact was also very strong. The two of them only used one clip, and the wax ball became a honeycomb full of cracks. Charlotte kicked it, and with a crisp sound, the wax ball that was riddled with holes disintegrated. Part of it fell down the cliff, and the other part rolled into the belly of the mountain. A passage was also revealed. It was about 1 meter in diameter, and it was so deep that the bottom could not be seen. Its structure was irregular. It was not man-made, but natural. It looked like part of a karst cave. Although the pyramid in the belly of the mountain was built by people, it obviously used the power of nature. It could be speculated that the belly of the mountain was originally a huge karst cave. Later, someone discovered it and built a hollow pyramid. However, the person here was not a person, but a country or a nation. No individual had such ability. It could only be a country or a nation. However, even if the history of Israel was pushed back to the 13th century BC, when the Hebrews returned from Egypt to the land of Canaan, Charlotte did not believe that the Hebrews had the ability to build a pyramid in the belly of a mountain. If it was not the Hebrews or the Arabs, then who could it be? Just as Charlotte was thinking about these questions, Akiko Tsukino twisted a light stick and then went into the passage. "Be careful." Charlotte grabbed her ankle and then put his hand against her back into the passage. He wore a multifunction watch on his hand, which could test altitude, air pressure, and air composition. This was a customized multi-function tactical watch from the Swiss company Abbey, and it cost $200,000. Not only did he wear it, but every member of the Zodiac team also had the same watch. However, he was worried that Akiko Tsukino was in a hurry to go in and did not test the air quality, so he grabbed her ankle to prevent her from continuing to climb in. If there was poisonous gas in the sealed passage, it would be very dangerous to go in rashly. It was not impossible, but even if the probability was 1 in 10,000, once it happened, the consequences would be irreversible. The test results came out quickly. The air quality was not very good, but it was still normal. Charlotte let go of Akiko Tsukino's ankle. Akiko Tsukino crawled forward and said, "If there is a change in the air quality, you must retreat when I tell you to." Charlotte followed her and crawled forward. "Be careful. This place is very strange." The naturally formed passage was crooked, and it was like a person's intestines. Crawling in such an environment, with no end in sight. Even people like Akiko Tsukino and Charlotte, who had killed countless people, could not help but feel nervous and worried. Charlotte crawled forward and carved marks on the stone wall of the passage with his saber. This was necessary. If they got lost in the car's cave, he could use the marks he carved to return to the outside with Akiko Tsukino. After about half an hour of difficult crawling, Akiko Tsukino suddenly stopped, and her body made a backward movement. Charlotte had just finished carving a mark and did not pay attention to her situation. As a result, his head bumped into her pert butt. It felt like his face bumped into a large piece of jelly. His nose also smelled the fragrance of a woman, and there was a hint of a woman's unique smell. "What's going on?" Charlotte hurriedly stepped back a little. Akiko Tsukino obviously did not take the intimate contact that had just happened to Hart. She said, "We're at the end. Come and see for yourself." With that, she grabbed a rock and slid out of the passage. Charlotte crawled to her position, and the scene in front of him stunned him. Under the illumination of the glow stick in Akiko Tsukino's hand, in his field of vision were densely packed white skeletons, arranged in circles. Below him was a bottomless dark abyss, but he could still see the situation below with the faint light of the glow stick. It was the bottom of the pyramid. He saw the sarcophagus and the bodies that had turned into bones. It was the bodies of the archaeologists George, Elena, Professor Mark, and the Israeli staff. They had been slaughtered here. Almost 20 years had passed, and their bodies had long been decomposed by bacteria. Akiko Tsukino threw the glow stick in her hand down. The glow stick fell to the bottom of the pyramid, and Akiko Tsukino also saw some of the scene. She opened her mouth wide and exclaimed, "This place, it's a miracle." Miracle was probably the most suitable word she could think of to praise it. Charlotte also twisted a glow stick. He held the glow stick above his head and observed the situation above. When he saw it, his mouth was open and he couldn't close it. In the video that George had shot, George had stood at the bottom of the pyramid. The top of the pyramid was a few hundred meters from the bottom. At that time, the camera didn't have high pixels at all, and because of the lack of light, the video he had shot was not clear at all, so he could only see a vague outline of the situation at the top. This time was different. The place where he and Akiko Tsukino had entered was close to the top of the pyramid, and he could see it clearly. There were also skulls at the top of the pyramid, and they were also arranged layer by layer like bricks supporting the top of the pyramid. However, the kindest one, the skull at the top, was indeed different. It was crystal clear, as if it was carved out of crystal. Under the light of the glow stick, it sparkled and was dazzling. Charlotte's left eye twitched, and the crystal skull was suddenly pulled closer by his left eye, and his left eye instantly entered microvision mode. The details of the crystal skull were clearly displayed in his field of vision. It didn't have any traces of artificial carving, and it looked natural. A natural crystal skull. What kind of human would have such a skull? Although he hadn't used modern equipment and instruments to analyze it, Charlotte knew that the skull couldn't be a real crystal. But what it was definitely a mystery that was difficult to solve. "Boss, what are you looking at?" Akiko Tsukino followed Charlotte's line of sight and saw the crystal skull. Her mouth opened wide again, and she couldn't close it. After a few minutes, Charlotte withdrew his gaze. "Let's go down first. That skull. Aren't you going to take it?" Akiko Tsukino really wanted to take the skull. Charlotte said, "Before we figure out, it's best not to touch it. We shouldn't be the first to find it. Why didn't the people in front move?" "What you said makes sense. Let's go down," Akiko Tsukino said. Chapter 1009. Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino used a rope to cross the inlaid area of the skull and then went from the surface of the rock to the bottom. Akiko Tsukino screwed up more light sticks and threw them into the corners of the pyramid. Most of the space was illuminated, and they could see some things that couldn't be seen in the video, such as the statues. There were some statues around the sarcophagus, and they were all statues of faceless warriors. Charlotte had seen such statues in the ancient tomb under the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, where he had dug out a large number of ancient alloy fragments from the body of the old man. These statues of the faceless warriors evoked memories in Charlotte, and images of that time emerged in his mind. There were 360 degrees of images with no blind spots, and no details were missed. His brain made a comprehensive comparison between the faceless warrior statues in the two places. His brain quickly came to the conclusion that the faceless warrior statue in the ancient tomb under the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was made by the same group of craftsmen as the faceless warrior statue in the ancient tomb under the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. What do the faceless warriors symbolize? Akiko Tsukino's voice broke the silence in the pyramid and Charlotte's thoughts. Charlotte smiled bitterly. "Who knows? You're also a samurai. From your samurai's point of view, what do you think they symbolize?" Akiko Tsukino thought for a moment. "Ninjas." "Ninjas?" Charlotte secretly said in his heart. "These things are probably prehistoric, and it's a mystery that's difficult to solve in itself. Japan didn't even exist at that time. How could these faceless warriors be ninjas?" Of course, I'm not saying they're ninjas. In the history of Japan, no ninjas have ever come to Jerusalem. Akiko Tsukino said again. "What I mean is that they're samurai similar to ninjas. Not having a face means that they have no identity. In ancient times, kings and nobles liked to keep their own samurai, and not having a face may also represent their loyalty. They don't care about status, they don't fight for honor, and they aren't afraid of sacrifice. As long as their master needs them, they will give up their lives." This statement made Charlotte's eyes light up. He had tried to decipher the mystery of the faceless warrior statues before, but the angle he chose was that those people had no faces, so it was possible that they were an extinct species. He had never tried to understand the mystery from the samurai's point of view. Now that Akiko Tsukino had explained it to him from the samurai's point of view, he suddenly felt that what she said made sense. These faceless warriors weren't actually faceless. The sculptors didn't sculpt faces to symbolize loyalty and sacrifice, just like Giovanna and the other Knights' Creed. "Well said." Charlotte walked toward a statue of a faceless warrior. "I can say anything, but I can't prove it." "Boss, you're so smart. You'll definitely solve these mysteries." Akiko Tsukino followed Charlotte. Charlotte touched the statue with his hand. It was cold to the touch. He activated the X-ray ability of his left eye and tried to see through the statue. A strange result appeared. His X-ray vision was sucked in by a whirlpool. Not only could he not see what was going on inside the statue, but the energy in his body was also quickly draining away. This was not the first time he had experienced this. Every time he tried to see through the ancient alloy, there would be strong side effects. It was very painful. The current situation was very similar, but it was far from the level that made him feel uncomfortable. Charlotte ended his X-ray vision and suddenly reached out to push the statue of the faceless warrior in front of him. He exerted a lot of strength, but the statue of the faceless warrior did not move an inch. He tried again, but it still didn't move. He looked at the bottom of the statue. The bottom of the statue was not embedded in the ground. It's a statue. Could it be that it weighs a ton? Xiaolei's heart was filled with shock. In the ancient tomb under the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, his attention was on the old man's body. He dug out a large number of ancient alloy fragments from the old man's body. His attention shifted to the fragments that he felt. At that time was limited, and he didn't carefully study the faceless warrior statues. He left after getting the ancient alloy fragments. His intuition at that time was that the faceless warrior statues were just ordinary stone statues. Therefore, he only felt that it was strange that the statues didn't have faces. He didn't pay much attention to them. Now, it seemed that he had missed out on something of great research value. Charlotte suddenly pulled out his gun and fired 2 shots at the faceless warrior statue. Bang, bang. Gunshots rang out. 2 bullets hit the statue's chest. Sparks flew everywhere. The bullets bounced off and fell to the ground. The bullets were flattened, but the statue's chest didn't have a trace of being hit. One had to know that the power of the Viper pistol was comparable to that of the Desert Eagle. Even a steel plate would have a dent. However, the stone statue was undamaged. It was extremely heavy, which meant that it was extremely dense. The bullets couldn't leave a scratch, which meant that it was extremely strong. Among the known rocks in the natural world, probably only diamond could meet these 2 conditions. However, how could a celestial's diamond be so big? 10 carats was already very rare, let alone one that weighed a ton. Charlotte had a preliminary conclusion in his mind. The material used to carve the faceless warrior statue was not the rock of this world. It was either from another world, or it was an artificial rock produced by a more advanced civilization. Also, what were the tools used by the craftsmen who carved them? All signs showed that these faceless warrior statues and the pyramid itself were not the work of modern human civilization. It was either from an extraterrestrial civilization or a prehistoric civilization. Charlotte suddenly thought of a character, the prehistoric one. The prehistoric one left behind in the bronze grimoire said that he unified the land and built his kingdom. His people called him the One, and he was their god. Could it be the corpse of the old man in the ancient tomb under the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was really the prehistoric one? This pyramid was also built by him? There were still traces of the civilization he built in this world. Was this pyramid one of them? At that time, his civilization could produce such advanced artificial rocks? Could the civilization he built be comparable to the modern technological civilization? How is this possible? A wave of questions came, and Charlotte's thoughts became a mess again. There was no other way. The only connection he had with the prehistoric was the pitiful information left behind in the bronze grimoire. He had no other information to investigate. Other than guessing, he had no other way to find the answer. Boss, what are you trying to do? Do you want to knock it down? I can help you. Seeing Charlotte pushing and shooting, Akiko Tsukino was already confused by Charlotte. Charlotte shook his head. No need, forget it. Let's go somewhere else. He walked toward the stone wall. He pushed and shot the statues just to find out what they were made of. This goal had been achieved. He didn't really want to knock them down. There were a lot of murals on the stone wall. Charlotte's gaze moved to the murals. He couldn't move his eyes away. The content of the first mural was, a young man obtained a box, and he obtained divine power. He killed bears, mammoths, and even dinosaurs. He led his tribe's warriors to battle everywhere. He occupied a large piece of land and built his own kingdom. The second mural, a young prince wearing a fake royal robe. He held a box in his hand. It was a complete box. Many faceless warriors, ministers, and citizens worshipped him. He had many wives and children. Those wives had different skin colors. He built countless cities. His kingdom's territory was vast and boundless. He occupied almost the entire world. However, the plates of those continents were different from the plates of the current continent. There were only some similarities. The third mural, a man's wife and children grew old one after another. He was still young. No one in his kingdom dared to resist him because he was an immortal god. Later, he left his kingdom. He took that box with him. His footprints extended from one continent to another from one ocean to another. He didn't say what he was looking for. The fourth mural. One day, the man suddenly returned. He gathered craftsmen and chose a mountain. He built a pyramid in the middle of the mountain. After the pyramid was completed, a beam of light shone down from the top of the pyramid and shone on the sarcophagus. There were granular objects in the beam of light. The man collected them, wrapped them in amber, and put them into the sarcophagus. The man ordered to kill all the people who built the pyramid. The ones who carried out the order were the faceless warriors. The content of the fifth group of murals. The man left his kingdom once again, never to return. Wasn't this the only content that was left in the bronze grimoire? The only difference was that the prehistoric way, he didn't mention in the bronze grimoire that he had returned to his kingdom to build the pyramid. What did he collect from the beam of light? Could it be? A question suddenly popped up in Charlotte's mind. His heart skipped a beat. He tapped on his multifunction watch. His multifunction watch immediately turned into a flashlight. The snow-white light shone on the fourth mural. He saw the beam of light shining down from the top of the pyramid. Unfortunately, the mural was covered with a layer of dust, so he couldn't see more details. Phew! Charlotte blew a breath at the mural. A cloud of dust was blown away, revealing the entire content. Under the light of the wristwatch, there were some sparkling substances on the mural. They were inlaid by the craftsman with gold, silver, and crystal powder. When covered with dust, they looked like a part of the rock. However, when the dust was blown away, they revealed their noble and extraordinary appearance. Seeing the sparkling gold, silver, and crystal powder, Charlotte knew what they symbolized. They symbolized the powder of the AE capsule. The prehistoric way EE returned to his kingdom, built the pyramid, collected the powder, and then killed everyone who knew. This was definitely not done casually. Perhaps there was a hidden mission behind him. The contents of this mural gave him a new understanding of the origin of the AE capsule. It was not made by someone, but brought about by a beam of light shining down from the top of the pyramid. Charlotte suddenly raised his head and looked at the crystal skull embedded at the top of the pyramid. Where did it come from? Where did that beam of light come from? Chapter 10:10. Charlotte had come across a story about the crystal skulls, which was recorded in Unsolved Mysteries of the World. He had been deeply attracted by this story, so he had a deep impression of it. According to the book, the crystal skulls were made by the Mayans. There were 13 of them in total, and they were later brought to the American continent by the Native Americans. Later, the crystal skulls were found in the ruins of the Mayan civilization. It was said that they were made based on the skull of a woman, and they were the same size as the real skull. The Mayan astronomers said that they had supernatural powers, and that they carried the secrets of the origin of mankind and the universe. It was also related to whether the humans of this era could survive the end of the world. Humans needed to place the 13 crystal skulls in the right position to generate a magnetic field and put the Earth in the right orbit. Of course, these claims were proven to be fictitious, including the end of the world predicted by the Mayans. The crystal skulls in the collection of the British Museum were said to be processed with a grinding wheel, which meant that they were modern products and not historical relics at all. However, whether it was the crystal skulls found in the ruins of the Mayan civilization, the 13 crystal skulls brought to the American continent by the Native Americans, or the crystal skulls in the collection of the British Museum, they were obviously not the same type of crystal skull at the top of the pyramid. Because it was crystal clear, but that did not mean that it was made of crystal. It looked like a real skull. Akiko Tsukino also raised her head to look at the crystal clear skull at the top of the pyramid, but she did not have the ability that Charlotte had. The light from the light stick could not reach a height of a few hundred meters, so she could only see darkness. However, this did not prevent her from making the right judgment. She said, "Boss, are you looking at that skull again? When we leave here, I will help you take it down and take it with me. It should belong to you." Charlotte looked away. He was a little curious about what she said. Why should it belong to me? Akiko Tsukino said, "It was a very strange feeling. The people in front did not take it away because they were waiting for you to appear." Charlotte was stunned on the spot. He didn't really believe it. but he couldn't deny it completely. The Israelis who first discovered this place had enough time to discover the existence of the crystal skull, and the armed men who rushed in and killed the Israelis had enough time to explore this place. The possibility of them not discovering the crystal skull was very small. So why didn't they take it? Also, his father, Xia Changhe, even knew about the secret passage at the bottom of the pyramid. How could he not know about the existence of the crystal skull? So why didn't he take it? From the perspective of the leader of the armed forces with the king cobra tattoo and his father, Xia Changhe, the reason why the crystal skull still existed was because it was waiting for the right person to appear. Who was the right person? Charlotte thought to himself. If Dad knew about the existence of the pyramid and the crystal skull, he should have told me earlier. Why didn't he tell me? Could it be that he only found out recently? He found out the secret here. He left me a message, and then he left? How could he be sure that I would come here? He didn't know that I deceived the CIB and obtained the video from Williams. Charlotte couldn't figure it out, no matter how he thought about it. So he gave up. He came to the sarcophagus. The sarcophagus was still open, and the heavy coffin lid was pushed to the ground. The letters on it were still clear. The sarcophagus was empty, and the bottom was covered with a fine layer of dust. There was air circulation here, and with air, there would be dust. This was unavoidable. Looking at the empty bottom of the sarcophagus, Charlotte couldn't help but think of a set of images. The prehistoric only collected the powder from the beam of light falling from the sky, then put the powder in a piece of amber and placed it in the sarcophagus. Above the prehistoric only's head, the crystal skull glowed as if it wanted to send him a message. Boss? It was Akiko Tsukino's voice. Charlotte came back to his senses. What? Nothing. I just feel that you look strange, Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte smiled. Why do you say that? How am I strange? Akiko Tsukino said, Actually, it's not strange. It's the way you look when you're focused on thinking about a problem. It's very charming. Although the light was dim, Charlotte could still see her blushing face. It's really hard to believe that a murderous female ninja would actually blush because of a single sentence. Their eyes met, and the atmosphere between the two of them was a little different from before. Akiko Tsukino took a step toward Charlotte. This step was very hesitant and not straightforward. But the second step was very straightforward, and there was no hesitation at all. Her angry erection almost bumped into Charlotte. Charlotte hurriedly took a step back, and then changed the topic. Well, let's look elsewhere. Well, you go to the left, and I'll go to the right. If you find anything, you must tell me. There was a flash of disappointment in Akiko Tsukino's eyes, but she still nodded and then walked to the left. Charlotte was well aware of Akiko Tsukino's reaction. He had too many love experiences. Although he couldn't be called a love killer, he could still figure out a woman's mind. He had too many things that attracted women: appearance, ability, temper, character, money, reputation, status, and even the ability to turn the situation on the battlefield. It was normal for Akiko Tsukino to be attracted to him. When they were alone, she wanted to hint at him and express her affection. This was actually understandable. However, as a father of 4 children, he had to control his lower half. This was also his responsibility as a husband and father. The bottom of the pyramid was very large, and it took Charlotte a full hour to explore it. After an hour, he walked to the starting point of Akiko Tsukino, and Akiko Tsukino also walked to the starting point of his. The two returned to the sarcophagus, and the result was the same. They found nothing. Charlotte looked at the multifunction watch. We have been separated from Siamu and the others for 3 hours. We have to leave here. Akiko Tsukino said, I just looked at the satellite phone. There is no signal here at all. I don't know what the situation outside is now. There should be no problem. No one knows that we are here, Charlotte said. He walked to the bottom of the rock wall and began to climb. Akiko Tsukino climbed the rock after him, but her climbing speed was faster than Charlotte. She quickly surpassed Charlotte and climbed above him. Seeing her buttocks swaying in front of his eyelids, the bulging fullness and the dolphin-shaped curve, Charlotte couldn't help but have some reverie. Men were like this. God gave men the desire and instinct to reproduce. It It was deep in their genes and bones, and it couldn't be erased. If a man saw a sexy woman, especially her buttocks, and didn't have the slightest reaction or reverie, then he should really see an andrologist. The two climbed to the bottom of the rope one after another. Akiko Tsukino grabbed the rope and climbed up. Charlotte waited until she climbed to the entrance of the passage before grabbing the rope and climbing up. When he climbed to the entrance of the passage, Akiko Tsukino reached out to him. He grabbed Akiko Tsukino's hand and entered the passage. The entrance of the passage was very narrow. The two squatted at the entrance of the passage. Their bodies were crowded together, and it was inevitable that their bodies would touch. The crystal skull entered their line of sight again. It was the only reason why the two stayed at the entrance of the passage and didn't leave. "Boss, I'll take it for you," Akiko Tsukino said. "Wait." Charlotte pulled her back and then stood up close to her body. After standing up straight, he carefully grabbed a piece of skull above the entrance and tried to shake it with force. Crack! With a crisp sound, a skull that looked fine was crushed by him, and he didn't use much strength at all. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Just at the moment when the skull was crushed, the sound of something breaking through the air suddenly rang out. Charlotte hurriedly withdrew his hand, then squatted down and pulled Akiko Tsukino into the passage. But at that moment, Akiko Tsukino, who was originally below, suddenly exerted strength. She hugged Charlotte and did a 180-degree roll in the narrow space. When she landed, her body was on top of Charlotte. She wanted to use her body as a shield for Charlotte. Ding, ding, ding. Sparks splashed along the edge of the passage and the inner wall. Ugh! Akiko Tsukino suddenly groaned. The hidden weapon only had one wave of attack, and it stopped in the blink of an eye. Charlotte suddenly pulled Akiko Tsukino down. At a glance, he saw a black steel needle stuck in her buttocks. It was like the blow darts that the Indian warriors were good at using, but there were no feathers at the back. Charlotte suddenly pulled out the steel needle, and then pulled down Akiko Tsukino's trousers. Her trousers were elastic, so it was easy to pull out. "Boss, you!" Akiko Tsukino looked back at Charlotte, but in that second, she saw Charlotte grab her combed cotton key cloth and without hesitation, pulled it down. The plump and perky big white ball at the highest place that's snow-white like jade. There was a triangular wound, and a trace of black blood was slowly coming out from the wound. "Poison," Charlotte said, and then leaned down, bit her wound, and sucked the poisonous blood from the wound. "Boss, you!" Akiko Tsukino's brain was a mess. In addition to fear and worry, there was also shyness and excitement. These emotions filled her brain, and she couldn't help but be confused. "Hey!" Spitting out a mouthful of blood, Charlotte lowered his head to suck again. Mouthful after mouthful, until after 10 mouthfuls, bright red blood flowed out from Akiko Tsukino's wound. But Charlotte was still not relieved. He pressed her big white ball and sucked a few mouthfuls before stopping. "Boss, thank you." Akiko Tsukino's voice was very small, and her face was already red. "What are you talking about? You didn't have to do that just now." Charlotte said, "The person who should say thank you is me." Akiko Tsukino avoided Charlotte's eyes. "Boss, I can die for you. You don't have to say thank you to me." Ah! There was a cry of pain. Xiaolei had squeezed her wound with all his might. Under his hands, that plump big white ball was squeezed together, and more bright red blood came out from the wound. Charlotte let out a long sigh of relief. Well, there should be no problem. The poison on the hidden weapon is very powerful, but it has been too long, and their toxicity has been weakened by time. Otherwise, you will die. You protected me like that. Is it worth it? "It's worth it," I said. "I can die for you." Akiko Tsukino didn't avoid Charlotte's eyes this time. Charlotte avoided her eyes. He looked at the opposite skull, and he quickly made a judgment. Those hidden weapons were fired from the eye sockets of the opposite skull, and the corresponding position happened to be parallel to us. I think each skull has a hidden weapon hidden in it. Once the opposite person touches the mechanism, they will be fired. This kind of hidden weapon is very fast, almost the same speed as a bullet. After we touch the mechanism, we have no chance to dodge. That boss. Akiko Tsukino somewhat unnaturally said. Can you let go of my butt? I want to wear pants. Charlotte discovered that he knew that he was still holding the big white ball and still maintained the position of squeezing the wound. He hurriedly let go and then turned around. He could pull out the other person's pants, but he was embarrassed to see her wearing pants. Chapter 10:11. The rustling sound of pants being put on rang in his ears. This kind of sound made Charlotte couldn't help but think of her big white ball. Men always have to fight with their other half at this time. Akiko Tsukino moaned, suddenly lying on Charlotte's back. Her body was so soft and tempting. Charlotte immediately became nervous. Akiko, I feel dizzy. Akiko Tsukino's voice was weak. Charlotte hurriedly looked back at her, only to find that her face was pale without any blood. He then grabbed her wrist, checking her pulse. Her pulse was very disordered. That was the manifestation of a regular heartbeat. This made him even more nervous. Do you feel very uncomfortable? Akiko Tsukino said weakly. It's not very uncomfortable, but my heart is beating very fast, and I don't have any strength. I'll take you out now. We'll go to the hospital. You lie on my back. I'll carry you out. Charlotte released her, and then lay on the ground, waiting for her to climb on his back. Akiko Tsukino said, No, you have to find a way to get that crystal skull. I can see it's very important to you. No matter how important it is, it's not as important as your life. Don't talk nonsense. Quickly climb on my back. Charlotte was a little angry. Akiko Tsukino said, No, I'm really fine. I can hold on. Charlotte's expression was very serious. Although I sucked out most of the poison in your wound, this kind of primitive method can't suck out all the poison. We don't understand that kind of poison, in case. Don't waste time, boss. Akiko Tsukino said. You really are. Charlotte gloomily sighed. He took out an engineering plastic box from his backpack, and then took out the parts of the Gale assault rifle from the engineering plastic box. He assembled the Gale assault rifle, then climbed to the entrance of the passage and fired at the skull above. Bang, 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 skulls shattered one after another, and the dense steel needles and hidden weapons formed a net at the top of the pyramid that not even a fly could fly through. Charlotte emptied the 5 magazines in his equipment and forcefully carved out a path from the rock wall. The steel needles and concealed weapons stopped. Charlotte took the rope and the special climbing gloves given to him by Akiko Tsukino and carefully climbed up to the crystal skull at the top of the tower. In the process of crawling, his body was almost always suspended in the air, relying entirely on the strength of his arms to support his body. At the same time, he had to guard against the steel needles and hidden weapons. It was like walking on a tightrope on a cliff. A little carelessness, and he would be consigned to eternal damnation. 10 minutes later, Charlotte approached the crystal skull at the top of the pyramid. At such a close distance, the crystal skull was clearly displayed in front of him. It was indeed not the crystal skull found in the Mayan ruins, nor was it the crystal skull in the collection of the British Museum, because it was not made of crystal at all. The crystal skull of the Mayans was carved out of a whole piece of crystal, but it looked like a natural skull, without the slightest trace of artificial carving. A real skull? Whose skull would look like this? Is it God? Charlotte's heart was filled with horror. Boss! Akiko Tsukino's voice came from below. Hurry up. Although her voice was very weak, it was very quiet here, and Charlotte heard it immediately. Only then did he recover from his shock. I'll be done soon. Hold on a little longer, he said. Although he said so, he did not immediately reach for the skull, but first fixed a rope on the rock. The rope hung down, and the other end was just hanging at the entrance of the passage. This was his only escape route in case of an accident. After solving the problem of escape, Charlotte awakened the ability of X-ray vision. However, he did not dare to use X-ray vision on the crystal skull. What he saw was the situation around the crystal skull and inside the rock. The rock structure around the crystal skull was very complicated, and it did not seem to be a natural structure. There were no hidden weapons behind the crystal skull, and there was no passage or gap leading to the ground that allowed light to shine through. It was just embedded in the rock, and if you wanted to take it down, it did not seem to be a very difficult thing. Why is the rock structure at the top so strange? Will it be dangerous? Charlotte pondered this question in his heart. On one hand, Akiko Tsukino did not know how long she could hold on and whether her situation would continue to deteriorate. On the other hand, the crystal skull was close at hand, and he could take it down with just a stretch of his hand. However, the more he could succeed with just a stretch of his hand, the more alert he felt. At this critical moment, his heart was abnormally calm. The internal structure of the rock at the top of the pyramid appeared in Charlotte's brain. The size, and even the approximate weight of the rock were constructed in his brain and then piled up to form a triangular top. Immediately, his brain simulated removing the crystal skull at the top. As soon as the crystal skull was removed, the top of the pyramid collapsed with a crash. Huge stone bricks fell down one by one, and then the entire pyramid collapsed. Although it was a simulated scene, Charlotte was still scared and broke out in a cold sweat. In the scene simulated by his brain, from removing the crystal skull to the top of the pyramid collapsing, it took at most 2 seconds. In 2 seconds, he could not escape to the passage at all. And even if he successfully escaped to the passage, the subsequent collapse of the entire pyramid would bury him and Akiko Tsukino in the belly of the mountain. With such a design, no one could take away the crystal skull at the top of the pyramid. When he first came in, he had guessed why the crystal skull was not taken away, but he did not guess that it could not be taken away. If it could not be taken away, of course it was here. Whether it was the man with the king cobra tattoo or his father Xia Changhe, they probably knew something about the situation. Otherwise, as long as one of them had the idea of taking it away, the pyramid would have collapsed long ago, and he would not have been able to come at all. The person who built this pyramid was the only one in prehistory. From the message he gave me, he did not seem to be my enemy. He even regarded me as a successor and asked me to kill Zhu Xinhua. In that case, this crystal skull was placed on this pyramid by him. If he was waiting for me to take it away and continue his unfinished journey to find the answer, would he have left me a way to take the crystal skull away? Xiao Lei's mind flashed, and his brain suddenly entered extraordinary mode. This time, his brain was not simulating the scene of the pyramid collapsing after the crystal skull was taken away, but calculating where the balance point of the stone brick structure was. In his brain, the size, weight, and position of each stone brick were used in the calculation. A few minutes later, Charlotte's gaze suddenly moved to a rock. He moved over and opened his mouth to blow a breath. The dust on the surface of the rock was blown away, and a pattern was revealed. His left eye twitched slightly, and he looked through the pattern. Only then did he realize that there was a gap under the pattern, and it was the top of the entire pyramid, and even the balance point of the entire pyramid. You really left me a safe channel. I don't know why, but I feel that there are many similarities between us. I promise you, the path that you did not finish, I will definitely finish it. I will solve all the mysteries, and that day, I will tell you the answer I found, Charlotte said to himself. He pulled out the military knife and stabbed the E pattern. Crack! There was a crisp sound. The surface of the rock with the E pattern suddenly cracked, and the military knife stabbed into the gap. The blade and the gap were 90% matched. Without hesitation, Charlotte reached out and grabbed the crystal skull at the top. He shook it a few times and then took it off. He slid down the rope, and in the blink of an eye, he was already at the entrance of the tunnel. He swung lightly in the air, and his body landed at the entrance of the tunnel. Did you get it? Akiko Tsukino was very excited, and her face was even paler. Yes, we need to leave this place. Charlotte put the crystal skull into his equipment bag and then crawled on the ground. Quick, get on my back. Akiko Tsukino climbed onto Charlotte's back. Her arms circled around his neck, and her legs clamped around his waist. Charlotte crawled back to the entrance that he came from, and he held a glow stick between his lips. Thankfully, he had left a mark before he came, or else it would be easy to get lost in the winding cave. Boss, if I die, can you bury me in the backyard of Ping and residence? Akiko Tsukino whispered into Charlotte's ear. Don't be silly, you won't die, Charlotte said as he crawled quickly. I'm serious, can I? Charlotte was startled, and then said in a heavy tone, if that's the case, of course. Can you plant a cherry blossom tree next to my tombstone? Sure. Let's not talk about this anymore, okay? Charlotte's mood worsened. If the price of obtaining the crystal skull was to sacrifice Akiko Tsukino, then he would rather not have the crystal skull. Nothing was more important than life, not to mention the life of a woman who could die for him at any time. Then I'm relieved. Akiko Tsukino laughed and then sighed. What a pity. What? Do you have a wish? Tell me, I'll definitely help you fulfill it. Charlotte's eyes were already filled with tears. Really? Of course, no matter what wish you have, I'll help you fulfill it, Charlotte said. Akiko Tsukino hesitated and then said, I haven't even had a boyfriend. I'm still a woman without that kind of experience. If I die like this, it'll be too much of a pity. You really want to help me fulfill this wish? Charlotte was suddenly tongue-tied. Buried in the backyard of Ping and residence, planting a cherry blossom tree next to the tombstone, these wishes were not a problem. Other wishes, such as a sports car, a mansion, and a lifetime of money, he could also fulfill them. But this wish, he was in a difficult position. Thank you, Akiko Tsukino said. Thank you? Thank me for what? Charlotte really wanted to slap himself. Akiko Tsukino said, You promised me to fulfill my wish. I'm really grateful. No, too touched. When I'm better, let's talk again. Charlotte, didn't she want the cemetery and the cherry blossom tree? Now, she said to wait until she was better? What kind of situation was this? Cha-cha-cha. Suddenly, there was an ear-piercing sound behind him. Oh no! Charlotte's face suddenly turned pale. He once again increased his crawling speed. At this moment, he wished he could turn into a dog and run forward with 4 legs. Chapter 10:12. After all, the knife that was inserted in the balance point was not a perfect fit. It was only a 90% fit with the balance point. If Charlotte had more time, he could have found or made a perfect fit, but Akiko Tsukino's situation was getting worse, so he didn't have more time. Boss, let me go. You can escape by yourself, Akiko Tsukino said. Don't talk nonsense. Stay here. Charlotte crawled forward with his hands and feet. He wore the special climbing gloves that Akiko Tsukino gave him. They were good for his crawling, but the hard limestone had cut his pants. His knees were already bruised and bloody, but he couldn't care so much. He only had one thought, and that was to carry Akiko Tsukino and escape before the pyramid collapsed. Crack, crack, crack. There was another sound behind him, and the whole mountain was shaking. From time to time, a piece of rock or a cloud of dust fell from the download channel. It gave people the feeling that this place would collapse at any time and bury everything. Let me go, let me go. Akiko Tsukino was eager to die, and she began to struggle. She thought that she had become Charlotte's burden, and she was eager to die. Xiale suddenly waved his hand and hugged her buttocks. He wore climbing gloves with spikes on his hands, and as he grabbed her, the spikes on the gloves suddenly pierced into Akiko Tsukino's butt. Ugh! Akiko Tsukino let out a muffled groan and sucked in a breath of cold air in pain. It was this prick that made her a little more clear-headed. Charlotte crawled and shouted, I won't leave you alone. Either we leave here together, or we die here together. Choose one. Akiko Tsukino hugged Charlotte's neck tightly, and her legs clamped on his waist even harder. She didn't speak, but this was her response. The sound behind him grew louder and louder, and the mountain trembled more and more violently. However, it did not collapse all at once. After all, the military knife that was embedded in the point of balance had a 90% compatibility rate, and it was still playing its role in maintaining balance. It was also because of this that Charlotte finally crawled to the exit. At the entrance of the cave, Charlotte untied his belt and bound Akiko Tsukino to his body. Then, he climbed down the rock wall. The tremors inside the mountain were very strong, but the tremors outside the mountain were not as strong. With the help of the spiked teeth, climbing gloves, he climbed down very quickly. As the distance between him and the ground became shorter and shorter, the tremors outside the mountain became more and more intense. It felt like a magnitude 8 earthquake. Rumble. The sound of explosives exploding suddenly came from the inside of the mountain, and the entire mountain top collapsed. Charlotte's feet pushed against the rock wall, and his whole body immediately separated from the rock wall, and then fell to the ground. Rumble. The entire mountain suddenly became half shorter. The rock that Charlotte had grabbed just now sank directly into the ground. If he had been a second slower, he and Akiko Tsukino would have been crushed into meat patties by the rocks and then buried. Bang! The two of them fell to the ground. Charlotte was below, and Akiko Tsukino was above. Originally, Akiko Tsukino was below, but before they landed, Charlotte twisted his body and switched positions. Under the violent impact and tremors, Charlotte opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Akiko Tsukino rolled down from Charlotte's body, but this time she was not injured. Charlotte used his body as a life-saving cushion for her. "Boss, are you okay?" Akiko Tsukino asked anxiously. She grabbed Charlotte's hand and wanted to help him up, but she lacked the strength. "No need, I'm fine." Puffed. Charlotte spat out another mouthful of blood. However, this was not because the injury had worsened, but because the pressure on his internal organs had been reduced. After spitting out this mouthful of blood, he felt much better. After all, his body had a near-perfect immune system, and his ability to self-regulate was far superior to ordinary people. The same injury, other people would need a few days or even half a month to recover, but he only needed a little time. Although Charlotte felt much better, the appearance of him spitting out 2 mouthfuls of blood still scared Akiko Tsukino. She asked nervously, "Are you really okay? Tell me, what can I do for you?" Charlotte got up from the ground. "I'm really okay. Don't worry about me." He looked around, and his face suddenly changed. "We've already come out, but why don't we see Sayamo?" Akiko Tsukino also looked around, and there was no one around. She also did not see Sayamo. This was not normal. Charlotte's heart suddenly raised a trace of vigilance, and his eyes moved in the direction of the valley entrance. This valley entrance was quiet, and it looked particularly desolate without any vegetation. Yelena should be at the valley entrance, but he did not see her at all. Charlotte then moved his eyes to the top of the hill that was half shorter, but he did not see Angumi Khan. Angumi Khan should be guarding the top of the hill with the pyramid, and with such a strong earthquake just now, he must have left. However, he looked at the hills on the left and right respectively, but unfortunately he did not see Angumi Khan. Yelena, Sayamo, and Angumi Khan, who were supposed to be waiting outside, were all gone. What was going on? Charlotte frowned. What happened outside when he and Akiko Tsukino were in the pyramid? Akiko Tsukino took out the satellite phone, but before she could make a call, there was suddenly the roar of an engine and the sound of a propeller tearing through the air from the direction of the valley entrance. A Black Hawk helicopter suddenly appeared in the sky. Just as the helicopter's propeller appeared, Charlotte had already picked up Akiko Tsukino and ran toward a pile of rubble. The pile of rubble had just been piled up. The rock wall that was hundreds of meters high had collapsed, and the falling stones could have been used to build a Versailles palace. It had become a hiding place for him and Akiko Tsukino. Charlotte had just stuffed Akiko Tsukino into a gap between the rocks when the helicopter appeared in the sky above the valley entrance. He then squeezed into the primitive gap. The Black Hawk helicopter quickly flew over and circled around the collapsed mountain. In the rubble, Charlotte looked at the Black Hawk helicopter hovering in the sky from the gap between the rocks. Although it was hundreds of meters high, such a distance was actually no different from a few meters to his left eye. He saw the pilot in the cockpit, who was wearing the uniform of the Israeli army, and several professional soldiers in the rear cabin, who were also wearing the uniform of the Israeli army. Otherwise, he could tell that these Israeli soldiers were from the Israeli army and air force. But the problem was, why would the Israeli soldiers appear here? Could the disappearance of Sayamo, Angumi Khan, and Yelena be related to these Israeli soldiers? Akiko Tsukino made a phone call from the gap between the rocks, but whether it was Saimu, Yelena, or Engumi Khan, he couldn't get through. I can't contact them. What happened? Akiko Tsukino's heart was filled with worry. Charlotte said, I don't know you. How are you? Can you still hold on? There shouldn't be a problem, but... Akiko Tsukino wanted to say something, but stopped. But what? I should be the one protecting you. But now you're the one protecting me. I become your burden. Akiko Tsukino said, Don't say that, we're all family. I treat you like my little sister, and protecting you is my responsibility as an older brother. Charlotte said, Are you men all so fickle? Akiko Tsukino suddenly said. Charlotte was stunned. You promised that you would fulfill my wish. Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte. The Black Hawk circled twice in the sky and didn't leave after completing its aerial reconnaissance. Instead, it landed. It landed on a piece of flat land about 100 meters away from where Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino were hiding. Other than the helicopter pilot, 6 fully armed Israeli soldiers jumped out of the helicopter and headed in their direction. Charlotte pulled out his Viper pistol. His Gale assault rifle had fallen in the mountain passage. Akiko Tsukino still had a Gale assault rifle in her equipment bag, but the space was narrow. It was difficult for her to take it out from her equipment bag and assemble it. The 6 Israeli soldiers quickly approached. Charlotte suddenly became nervous. He and Akiko Tsukino were hiding in the narrow gap between the rocks. If they were discovered, they would either be killed or captured. There was no third outcome, because the opponent wasn't just the 6 soldiers on the ground. There was also an armed helicopter behind them. It carried heavy machine guns and cannons. If a battle broke out, the Viper pistol in his hand wouldn't be able to do anything to the big guy, but the opponent could take his and Akiko Tsukino's lives in a single wave of attack. In such a situation, even he couldn't help but be nervous and even afraid. The 6 Israeli soldiers continued to walk over, conversing in Hebrew as they walked. Xiaolei had locked onto their lips in advance and read their conversation with a lip-reading spell. What's happening here? It seems like an earthquake. Earthquake? Go to hell. It's an earthquake in real life. But I don't think so, because everything else is normal. How can there be an earthquake only on a mountain? If it's not an earthquake, then what happened? God knows. 3 unidentified armed men escaped to Gaza. The people from Mossad are chasing them. I think what happened here must have something to do with them. You mean there's a terrorist attack here? Who would attack an uninhabited mountain? There's no such possibility. Reading this, Charlotte was anxious. The Mossad was a world-famous secret service, as famous as the Soviet Union's Krupp. The people from Mossad were chasing Saimu, Engumi Khan, and Yelena. How could he not be worried? Stop making meaningless guesses. Check this place and go back to report. One of the leaders ended the conversation. He then ordered his men to split into 2 groups. One group searched to the left, and the other searched to the right along the rocks. Chapter 10:13. The leader brought 2 heavily armed Israeli soldiers over to the pile of rubble. The 3 of them looked relaxed, but Charlotte was so nervous that he held his breath. Akiko Tsukino reached out and pulled Charlotte. Charlotte turned around to look at her, but at this moment, Akiko Tsukino suddenly squeezed in from behind him, and in an instant, she was in front of him. Chest to chest, legs to legs, there was not even a millimeter of space between the 2. What are you doing? Charlotte's voice was very soft, but it carried a stern tone of self-questioning. If they find us, you must shoot them, Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte was stunned. He understood what Akiko Tsukino meant. She wanted to use her body as a cover for him, in exchange for time and opportunity to kill the enemy. In his heart, he was still blaming Akiko Tsukino for her rash behavior, but after understanding her intentions, his heart was touched. Akiko Tsukino's mouth revealed a trace of a smile, and she slowly squeezed in front of Charlotte. The pair of plump breasts in front of her changed shape due to the recoil from Xiaolei's chest, but she didn't mind at all. Perhaps this was the reason why she smiled. She squeezed in and stood in front of Charlotte. In her hand was a Viper pistol, and she was ready to fight. The 3 Israeli soldiers stopped at the edge of the pile of rubble. "It's really scary. Half of the mountain is gone," an Israeli soldier said. "If anyone was at the foot of the mountain, I'm afraid they would have become meat patties by now," another Israeli soldier said. The leading officer carefully observed the pile of rubble, and he frowned. "Colonel Cantor dug the road into the valley a week ago, and today the mountain collapsed. Could there be some secret behind this?" Secret? Perhaps only Mossad's intelligence officer, Kearns, would know. He was the one who requested Colonel Canty to seal off this valley, and the suggestion to cut off the road was probably from him as well. Those guys from Mossad are very secretive. "No one knows what they are up to," an Israeli soldier said. "The mountain collapsed, so the interior must be empty. Maybe this mountain is a secret military base, a base to research secret chemical weapons," another Israeli soldier said. "All right, let's not talk about it anymore. After all, it's about Mossad. Be careful not to get into trouble. Let's go to the right and take a look. If there's no problem, we'll leave." The leading officer ended the conversation. The other 2 Israeli soldiers followed the officer away from the rubble and continued to search to the right. When they were far away, Charlotte let out a long sigh of relief. His palms and back were covered in cold sweat, and his feet were trembling slightly because of his nervousness. At this moment, Akiko Tsukino suddenly fell backwards. Charlotte hurriedly reached out to support her and said anxiously, "Akiko, what's wrong?" Akiko Tsukino closed her eyes and did not react at all. It was a miracle that she was able to hold on until now. Just now, she and Charlotte had both relaxed from the extreme state of extreme tension. Charlotte's legs were only trembling, but she had fainted directly. Charlotte held her tightly in his arms. He had already lost Amanda and Pu Taiyon, and that feeling was very painful. He did not want to go through it again. 10 minutes later, the Black Hawk took off and flew in the direction of Jerusalem. Charlotte dragged Akiko Tsukino out from the gap in the rocks and carried her on his back. He was faced with 2 choices. One was to go to Gaza, and the other was to go to Jerusalem. From a safety point of view, going to Gaza was the safest for him, and he might also be able to find Semu, Yelena, and Angumi Khan. But from Akiko Tsukino's point of view, she needed doctors and medicine, so she could only go to Jerusalem. Charlotte carried Akiko Tsukino in the direction of the entrance of the valley. In that direction, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was bathed in sunlight and looked very holy. Although he was carrying a person, Charlotte was not slow. He jogged all the way with Akiko Tsukino on his back, and only slowed down when he was really tired. He would walk for a distance, and when his strength recovered, he would jog again. As he moved, he kept his vision in a state of telescopic vision, observing the situation within a radius of more than 4,000 meters. He was not very worried about being discovered by the Israelis while he was moving, because his left eye could see further and clearer than ordinary binoculars. Walking out of the entrance of the valley, Charlotte left the road and chose the roadless wasteland. The Jeep Wrangler had already been driven away, but he did not know whether it was Siamu and the others or the Israelis who had driven it away. Charlotte was very worried about Angumi Khan, Yelena, and Siamu, but he could not care about the 3 of them now because Akiko Tsukino needed his care more. Half an hour later, an Israeli settlement appeared in the wasteland. It was an agricultural cooperative with inhabited houses and cultivated farmland on the wasteland. At a glance, Charlotte saw tomatoes, strawberries, and sweet peppers planted in the fields, and some Israeli farmers working in the fields. It was a scene filled with a sense of peace. Israel's agriculture was the most developed in the world, and the farmers' income was also the highest in the world. There were schools and hospitals in a settlement, which was equivalent to a small town. Akiko Tsukino's condition is getting worse. If I take her to Jerusalem, she might not last until then. Moreover, there are many Mossad spies in Jerusalem, and there are also people from the CIA. Going there will bring unknown risks. Why don't I go to this settlement first? Even if I can't solve the problem, getting a car would be good. Charlotte made up his mind. He ran toward the settlement with Akiko Tsukino. When he was about 500 meters away from the settlement, he put Akiko Sakino down and dug a hole to bury all the weapons, ammunition, and spy equipment in their bags. He remembered the location, then carried Akiko, Sakino, and walked toward the settlement. A few children were playing games on the road in the settlement. Some were playing as Israeli soldiers, and some were playing as Hamas. The children were playing, and it was a lively scene. A Jewish woman wearing an apron came out of a door and yelled at her children to go home for dinner. She saw Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino on Charlotte's back. She was stunned for a moment, then walked over. Charlotte greeted her first. He said in Hebrew, "Dear lady, my girlfriend needs a doctor. Can you help me?" "Oh, you know Hebrew, and you speak it so fluently. What happened to your girlfriend?" The Jewish woman came over. Charlotte said, "She seems to have been bitten by a snake or a scorpion. I sucked the poisonous blood out of the wound, but I still couldn't help her. Please help me." "Where are you from?" the Jewish woman asked. Charlotte said, "We are from China. We are here to travel. We are from Shanghai, China. My grandfather helped you Jews. We are here with my grandfather's last wish to find the relatives of the Jews he helped. I have a relic to give to the relatives of the Jews." "What is it?" $50,000, Charlotte said. "You're a good man. Come with me." The Jewish woman led the way. Charlotte followed her and asked, "Dear lady, are you taking me to the hospital?" "There is no hospital here, only a clinic. But my husband is a doctor, and the clinic is at my house. He should be able to help you," the Jewish woman said. Charlotte secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He had no choice but to lie to a kind Jewish woman. During World War II, the Jews were slaughtered by the German Nazis and fled all over the world. Some of them fled to Shanghai, China. The Chinese took them in and took care of them. The Jews were a grateful people, and they helped China a lot after the war. The Chinese who came to Israel to travel would also receive a certain degree of preferential treatment. He told such a lie and naturally won the sympathy of the Jewish woman. It even awakened the Jewish people's deep gratitude. Yes, coming from China to give $50,000, how could they not help such a good person? Charlotte followed the Jewish woman into her home. There was indeed a clinic in her home. There were many medicines in the medicine cabinet, as well as some blood testing equipment. Charlotte put Akiko Tsukino on the hospital bed. "Wait a moment, I'll call my husband. He's working in the fields." The Jewish woman left. Charlotte did not have time to wait. He pricked Akiko Tsukino's finger with a blood sample needle, and then used the blood analysis equipment to test the composition of her blood. Although he was not a doctor, his ability to treat patients and save people was much better than most doctors. The results of the blood sample test came out quickly. Akiko Tsukino's blood contained toxins that could decompose potassium, as well as components that could destroy the molecular structure of acetylcholine. As a result, it damaged the brain's neurons, causing an injury similar to Alzheimer's disease, which was commonly known as Alzheimer's disease. If the potassium in the body disappeared, the body would lack electrolytes. How could the heart still beat? The destruction of the molecular structure of acetylcholine would cause dementia in the brain, further increasing the damage. If it had not been for a long time, and most of the efficacy of such toxins have been lost in the weathering, Akiko Tsukino would have died at that time. After finding the nature of the toxins, Charlotte then began the corresponding treatment. He found the potassium chloride injection from the medicine cabinet and directly pushed Akiko Tsukino's vein. Then he gave Akiko Tsukino some drugs to alleviate the components that destroyed the molecular structure of acetylcholine. Whether it was the potassium chloride injection or the oral drugs for nerve treatment, they were actually very common drugs, because irregular heartbeat and Alzheimer's disease were very common diseases. This was a clinic, so of course, these commonly used drugs would be prepared. After that, the Jewish woman came in with a man. "Is she the patient?" The man came in and went straight to Akiko Tsukino, looking very professional. Charlotte said, "Yes, but what?" The man opened Akiko Tsukino's eyelids, checked her pupils, and grabbed Akiko Tsukino's wrist to check her pulse. Charlotte said, "I'm actually also a doctor. I was worried that her condition would deteriorate, so I've used your equipment and drugs to treat her." Now, she should be fine. Ah. The man looked at Charlotte in surprise. Are you also a doctor? Charlotte nodded. Yes, I'm a doctor from China. I work in a hospital in Shanghai. My name is Zhou Qiang. Nice to meet you. You're welcome. I like your China's culture. My name is Heimer, and this is my wife, Mina. The man who claimed to be Heimer shook hands with Charlotte, and then his wife, Mina, also shook hands with Charlotte. Charlotte exchanged a few words with the couple. Akiko Tsukino, who was lying on the bed, suddenly woke up. She opened her eyes and saw Heimer and Mina. She instinctively raised her hand. It was definitely not a greeting, but an offensive movement. Charlotte quickly grabbed her hand and pressed his upper body on her arm. He said excitedly, "Honey, you're awake. This is great. God bless you. You're awake. Akiko Tsukino, ? Charlotte then said, "Honey, I thought I would never see you again. Fortunately, we met a good person. Mr. Heimer's medicine saved you. Thank him." Akiko Tsukino already understood what was going on. She opened her mouth and said softly, "Thank you." Charlotte said, I forgot. My girlfriend doesn't understand Hebrew." Akiko Tsukino smiled. Chapter 10:14. As night fell, the city of Jerusalem in the distance was ablaze with lights. The ancient and modern elements were combined in that city, as well as its strong religious atmosphere, which made it different from all the other cities in the world. The atmosphere in the settlement was quiet and peaceful. Heimer's wife, Mina, made dinner. It was typical Israeli traditional food: kams, pizza, sardines, and red wine. Akiko Tsukino was still very weak and couldn't get up to eat. After Charlotte, Heimer, and Mina had dinner, he brought a plate of Israeli food to her room. This room was the guest room that Mina had prepared for him and Akiko Tsukino, the couple. When Charlotte opened the door, Akiko Tsukino's hand retracted into the quilt. She hid a fruit knife in her hand. Charlotte said, "Don't be nervous." When Akiko Tsukino saw that it was Charlotte, she took her hand out of the quilt and put the hidden fruit knife on the bedside table. Charlotte walked over. "Eat something. Your body is still very weak. Eat something and have a good sleep. Then you'll be fine. We'll leave here early tomorrow morning. Help me deal with my wound. I feel that it's inflamed and might be festering," Akiko Tsukino said. She frowned and looked like she was in pain. Charlotte felt a headache, but he still braced himself and said, "Eat something first. I'll go to Dr. Heimer's medicine cabinet to get some medicine and gauze." "Well, okay." Akiko Tsukino took the plate from Charlotte's hands. Heimer and Mina had already returned to their room. Charlotte didn't say goodbye to them and went directly to Heimer's room for treatment. He found some amoxicillin capsules, an aspirin, hydrogen peroxide, gauze, and tape from Heimer's medicine cabinet. When he returned to his and Akiko Tsukino's room, Akiko Tsukino had already eaten some sardines, as well as some pocket pancakes and pizza. She only ate a little and put the plate of food on the bedside table. "Why don't you eat more?" Charlotte walked towards her. "I don't want to eat anymore. I don't have a good appetite," Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte sat down by the bed and gave Akiko Tsukino a glass of water, as well as a few amoxicillin capsules and an aspirin tablet that he had prepared for her. "Take your medicine." Akiko Tsukino took the medicine and turned over. Charlotte hadn't done anything yet, but her face already had a shy blush. She was quietly waiting for something, but she didn't dare to look at Charlotte's eyes. "I have to treat the wound in that place again, sigh." Charlotte sighed in his heart. Then he braced himself and grabbed her elastic pants, carefully pulling it down. The elastic pants stopped at her thighs, and the big white ball wrapped in the key fabric was exposed under the light. It was full and perky, extremely sexy. Her closed legs were white and delicate, and there was no gap between them. However, there was also a little mysterious and mature scenery revealed. It was like a hill shrouded in the morning mist, hazy, and the details couldn't be seen clearly, but its outline was very clear. She didn't lie. Her wound was really bad. The blood that flowed from the wound had wet part of the key fabric, and formed a blood scar. The bit of fabric that covered the wound was wet, and white pus had seeped out, but not much. Charlotte tried to pull out, but the piece of fabric was stuck to her wound, and he couldn't pull it out at all. As soon as he pulled it out, Akiko Tsukino frowned. It hurts. Are you afraid of pain? Charlotte thought it was strange. For a woman like Akiko Tsukino, even if she was shot or stabbed, she wouldn't cry out because of the pain, let alone such a minor injury. But now, she was crying out in pain with just a little treatment. She was acting like a delicate girl. Of course I'm afraid. I'm a woman, Akiko Tsukino said, and then added, I'm a woman. There seemed to be a subtle hint in this sentence. I have to cut it off. Is that okay? Charlotte asked. Akiko Tsukino nodded. No problem. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to ask for my opinion. Xiaolei picked up the scissors and carefully cut open the elasticity. Then, he followed the opening down and cut it with a kacha-kacha sound. It was so white that it was almost exposed. It really felt like the kind of white flour that was used to make steam buns, and it was the kind that had yeast powder added. However, there was also a dirty part. It was the triangular wound, and the blood and pus made that part very bad. Charlotte looked away, then grabbed the piece of fabric that he had cut off and carefully pulled it out. He didn't dare to look at the process because it would make him feel like the male lead in a movie. When it was completely out of her body, he threw it on the ground. However, he still had to shift his gaze over and watch helplessly. If he didn't do that, how was he going to treat her wound? Sometimes, people couldn't avoid this kind of thing. Don't avoid treatment when you're sick. I'm a doctor. Charlotte thought so in his heart. Then, he picked up the hydrogen peroxide spray and sprayed it on her wound. Hiss! Tsukino Anko sucked in a breath of cold air. Just bear with it a little longer. Charlotte comforted her, and while treating the wound, he diverted her attention. By the way, what do you think? How are they now? Akiko Tsukino said, I don't know. I hope they're okay. They must have encountered some trouble and had to leave. When they get rid of the trouble, they will definitely come back to us. Charlotte also thought so. If Sayemu, Yelena, and Angumi Khan hadn't encountered big trouble, they wouldn't have left at that time. For some reason, the man with the king cobra tattoo on his arm appeared in his mind again. If that man was still alive, where would he be now? A few minutes later, Charlotte finished treating Akiko Tsukino's wound. There was a gauze scar on her big white ball. He pulled up her trousers. Well, there should be no problem. When we leave, we'll bring some amoxicillin capsules. They can help reduce your inflammation. Where are you going? Akiko Tsukino suddenly got up and grabbed Charlotte's hand. Charlotte was slightly stiff. I'm going to sleep on the sofa in the living room. Now that we haven't left the danger zone, someone has to stand guard. Akiko Tsukino used a little strength to pull Charlotte to the bed. But even when she was healthy, her strength was not as great as Charlotte's, let alone in this weak state. She straightened Charlotte's arm, but Charlotte's feet didn't move at all. Charlotte coughed awkwardly. Go to sleep. You need a good rest. Akiko Tsukino hesitated for a moment. She let go of Charlotte's hand and said, You promised me. Charlotte smiled bitterly. Let's talk about it when you're better. You're not fit to fulfill that kind of wish in your current state. Akiko Tsukino's face blushed again. She didn't say anything and just nodded gently. Charlotte left her room and let out a long sigh of relief. Sorry, when did I promise to fulfill her wish? I don't think I did, right? It wasn't a big deal to play irresponsibly. Many men love to do that kind of thing. But he wasn't that kind of man. Not to mention that he was now the husband of 4 women and the father of 4 children. He had to control his lower body. Although he had promised to fulfill her wish with a shake of his head, the situation at that time was very complicated. He planned to solve this problem by stalling. Heimer and Mina were already asleep, and the lights in the couple's room were not turned on. Charlotte sat in the living room for a while, then left Heimer's house. He took the path out of the settlement and ran to the place where the weapons and ammunition were buried. Early the next morning, he would leave with Akiko Tsukino. He wanted to bring back not only the weapons and ammunition, but also the crystal skull. The situation during the day was very special. His plan was to bring Akiko Tsukino to the hospital in Jerusalem for treatment. He didn't dare to bring the weapons, ammunition, and the crystal skull with him at all. He quickly found the place where the things were buried. He threw away the soil and took out the 2 equipment bags inside. Akiko Tsukino's equipment bag contained the weapons and ammunition, and his equipment bag contained the crystal skull. He opened it and checked. The weapons and ammunition were all there, and the crystal skull was still in his equipment bag. He looked around. Within a radius of more than 4,000 meters, there was no one except for the lights in the settlement. After confirming this, he took out the crystal skull from his backpack, held it in his hand, and stared at it. Under the moonlight, the crystal skull shone with a cold and gentle light. It didn't have the slightest temperature, like a piece of ice. Charlotte noticed this when he touched it in the pyramid, but he didn't have time to think about it at that time. Now he had time and space. He soon discovered something that surprised him. The crystal skull looked heavy, but its actual weight was only about half a kilogram. A normal human skull should weigh about half a kilogram, but it was twice as heavy as a normal skull. But it was definitely not crystal, because in terms of the density of a crystal the size of a human head would weigh at least a few times more. If it wasn't crystal, then what material was it made of? Could it really be the skull of a creature? What kind of creature would have such a skull forever? If the skull was made of a crystal-like material, then what about the other bones of that creature? These questions were unimaginable. Charlotte's left eye twitched slightly. He awakened the X-ray vision of his left eye. His X-ray vision penetrated the right eye socket of the crystal skull. At that moment, Xiaolei's brain suddenly shook violently. It felt like he had been in a dark dungeon for a month and was suddenly thrown into a scorching environment. All he could see was a vast expanse of white light, and he couldn't see anything. Chapter 10:15. The process was excruciating. It felt like someone was poking his eyeball with a needle. What followed was a piercing pain in his nerves. Charlotte felt like his head was about to explode. In the midst of this painful feeling, he saw many glowing substances that looked like gemstone powder in the white light. They surged into his brain like a tide of light, but it wasn't real. He knew very well that it was just an illusion. Why would he have such an illusion? He did not know. An even stranger illusion appeared. Vaguely, he seemed to see a person walking in the white light. He could only see the person's shadow, but not his face. The person walked forward. There seemed to be a door in front of him. Or maybe it was not a door, but a whirlpool made of light. Who was he? Where was he going? Charlotte still did not understand. This seemed to be a message stored in the crystal skull. It was hinting at something. After who knew how long, all the illusions disappeared. Charlotte was the first to return to normal. The starry sky was still clean and beautiful. The light of the moon and stars shone down, covering everything in a mysterious and hazy color. The crystal skull in his hand did not change. It was still cold and mysterious. Phew! Charlotte let out a long sigh. He realized his hands and feet were cold, and the skin on his back was wet with cold sweat. He remained motionless, still holding the crystal skull, but his mind had already left his body and flown far away. He thought about many things: the ancient alloy, the silver metal, the crystal skull, and even the statue of the faceless warrior in the pyramid. They did not belong to this world. Even though he had not solved the final mystery, connecting these things together gave him a very obvious hint. These things did not belong to the civilization on Earth. They came from another civilization beyond Earth. That mysterious civilization had set foot on Earth before the Ice Age and left their traces on this world. They might have perished and existed in the past. They might still exist, but on the distant planets, humans could not contact them. Yes, that must be it. These things will not appear for no reason. Someone has to create them. Humans obviously don't have this ability, so it can only be a higher civilization. Charlotte thought to himself, I assume that there is a more advanced civilization. It may have perished, or it may still exist. However, regardless of whether it has perished or still exists, Zhu Xianyue and the Black Robe Man could be the survivors of that civilization. They're not creatures from Earth. This conjecture had actually been confirmed a long time ago. That was, Zhu Xianyue ate human brains as food. She was a hunter, and the people of this world were just her prey. To her, humans in this world were the same as chickens, ducks, and fish. They were food that had been reared in captivity and could be slaughtered at will. Of course, he was the only exception. I wonder how Zhu Xianyue is doing now. Is she still in the U.S.? If the black-robed man is her kind, then why would she and the black-robed man kill each other? Thinking of Zhu Xianyue, this question popped up in Charlotte's mind. Questions came one after another. He could understand some of them, but he could not understand some of them no matter how hard he tried. A few minutes later, Charlotte wrapped up the crystal skull and put it back into the equipment bun. He carried his equipment bag and carried Akiko, Tsukino's equipment bag, before walking toward the Jewish settlement. When he reached the settlement, there were a few cars coming from Jerusalem. The cars were moving very fast, and their headlights were bright. It's already so late. Who would attack such a remote settlement? Charlotte was instantly alerted. His left eye twitched slightly, and his telescopic ability was awakened. The car at the front was a military off-road vehicle. There was a heavy machine gun mounted on the roof. Even though it was driving in a safe environment, the machine gunner maintained his firing position. There were a few fully armed Israeli soldiers sitting in the car. Their equipment was the equipment of the Israeli Special Forces, and it was very sophisticated. Behind a military off-road vehicle were two black sedans and a police car. The police car was equipped with a siren, but it was not turned on. Charlotte retracted his gaze and ran toward Dr. Heimer's house. He did not know why the Special Forces, police, and the people in the sedans had come to the settlement at this time, but Charlotte knew that he and Akiko Tsukino had to leave this place. Dr. Heimer's house was dark. Charlotte's footsteps stopped. When he left, Dr. Heimer and Mina were clearly asleep, and when he left, the lights in the living room were on. Akiko Tsukino would not get up to turn off the lights in the living room, so other than Dr. Heimer and his wife, Mina, who else would turn off the lights? The wall that blocked his vision silently disappeared from his left eye's field of view, and the situation in the house could be seen at a glance. There was no one in the living room. There was no one in Dr. Heimer and Mina's room. However, when he moved his gaze toward Akiko Tsukino's room, he saw three people. Akiko Tsukino, who was lying on the bed, Dr. Heimer and Mina, who were standing behind the door. One of the couple was holding an assault rifle, while the other was holding a Desert Eagle pistol. The safety of the gun was off, ready to fire at any time. Charlotte gently grabbed the doorknob and opened the door. Then he tiptoed inside. He pulled out his pistol, the Viper pistol with a silencer. He slowly moved toward Akiko Tsukino's room while maintaining his X-ray vision of the three people in the room. It was then that Akiko Tsukino spoke up. "It is useless. He will kill you." "What are you talking about?" Mina asked coldly. "Do you understand English?" "I understand." I said, "Why are you doing this?" Akiko Tsukino said in English, "We're not bad people. Why are you doing this? Don't try to deceive us." "You must be spies," Mina said. "Why do you say that we are spies?" Akiko Tsukino struggled to get up from the bed. "Lie down." Dr. Heimer shouted at Akiko Tsukino. "You better behave. Otherwise, I will kill you." Akiko Tsukino lay down. "You're not a doctor, nor are you a housewife. Who are you?" "Shut up." Mina walked toward Akiko Tsukino and punched Akiko Tsukino's head. Akiko Tsukino, who had just gotten up, fell back on the bed. Her body was still very weak, and she could not fight at all. Otherwise, with her ability and her achievements in killing people, it would not be difficult for her to kill the couple at all. "Are you Mossad's people?" Akiko Tsukino did not shut up. She did not take Heimer and Mina's threats seriously. Charlotte sneered. He had already understood that Akiko Tsukino had actually noticed his return. She was testing and provoking the Jewish couple in order to get information and create opportunities for him to make a move. Mina punched Akiko Tsukino's head again. She said coldly, "I know what you want to do, but what can you do even if you know? You and your companions will die tonight. You have been lurking here. What is your mission?" Akiko Tsukino said. "Kill her." Heimer suddenly said, "She talks too much. That guy will be back soon. We just need to keep one alive." Mina nodded and suddenly raised the Desert Eagle pistol in her hand. Puff! The door trembled. A bullet penetrated the wooden door and instantly pierced Mina's head. She was going to shoot Sakino Anko with the money in her hand. But before she could pull the trigger, she was shot and killed. Bang! 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 Heimer suddenly pulled the trigger, and the wooden door was instantly torn apart by the rifle bullet. Bang! With a gunshot, Heimer also fell down. Heimer fired at the door, but he ignored one person, and that was Akiko Tsukino, who was lying on the bed. He didn't know how cold-blooded and terrible the woman lying on the bed was. Although she lacked strength, she had no problem shooting him with the Desert Eagle. Charlotte opened the door and shot Heimer in the head. Let's get out of here. They called for reinforcements. I guess their reinforcements will be here in 5 minutes. Akiko Tsukino got up from the bed, but when she stood on the ground, she swayed and almost fell to the ground again. Charlotte quickly went forward to help her. Let me carry you. We'll leave in their car. Let's go to Gaza. Akiko Tsukino said, You drive their car and leave. I'll cover for you. But Charlotte didn't seem to hear what she said. Soon, he received a car key from Heimer's body. Boss, did you hear what I said? I'm serious. Akiko Tsukino said. As soon as she finished speaking, Charlotte slapped her on the butt and swallowed her in front of her. Hurry up. Akiko Tsukino was stunned for a moment, and then she climbed onto Charlotte's back. Charlotte carried her on his back and walked out. As he walked, he took out the time bombs from her equipment bag, took them out, activated them one by one, and threw them in a corner that was hard to see. The time of the bombs that he had activated was set to 5 minutes and 30 seconds. After leaving the room, Charlotte went to the garage. He put Akiko Tsukino in the passenger seat, then started the car and rushed out of the garage. He didn't turn on the headlights. Heimer and Mina's car was a Desert Raider produced by an Israeli car company. It was a powerful off-road vehicle. Although it was a civilian version, it could be used. Compared to the military version, it only lacked some weapons and equipment. It could travel unimpeded in the Gobi Desert, and going to Gaza was no problem at all. Just as the Desert Raider drove out of the settlement, the convoy formed by the few cars entered the settlement. Charlotte drove the Desert Raider off the road and climbed up a mound. Then, he turned back to look in the direction of the settlement. From what he saw, several special forces and police officers got out of the cars and quickly surrounded the house. The doors of the 2 black cars also opened, and several men in black suits got out of the cars. They were also holding heavy weapons such as assault rifles and submachine guns. One of the middle-aged men pointed at the door, and an Israeli Special Forces soldier suddenly used his shoulder to knock the door open. The moment the door opened, several armed men in black suits rushed in, followed by the Special Forces and police officers. Charlotte thought to himself, are those guys Mossad's men? The Mossad had been arranging spies in the vicinity. Was it to guard the secret of the pyramid? Or is there another reason? But before he could figure out these questions, there was a loud bang, and a violent explosion shattered the silence under the night sky. The flames shot into the sky, illuminating the night sky. It could be seen several miles away. The Desert Defender started up again, driving in the direction of Gaza. Chapter 10:16. 10 minutes after the explosion, a Nighthawk helicopter flew from a military base on the outskirts of Jerusalem to the settlement. Several armed men in black suits came down from the helicopter to investigate the situation. The residents of the settlement drove in all directions to search. The residents were all armed. Israel was a country where everyone was a soldier. Every adult had to serve in the military. After retiring, they were militia and could go to the battlefield at any time. Then, several drones flew in from the direction of Jerusalem and searched in different directions. They provided aerial reconnaissance for the ground searchers. The Desert Raider ran wildly in the wilderness. Without its headlights on, it was like a beast in the dark. After a while, Siale looked back at the sky and suddenly stopped the car. At this time, the Desert Raider that Charlotte was driving was at least an hour away from Gaza. Akiko Tsukino also realized something. She looked back, but she saw nothing. She asked tentatively, "Boss, are there pursuers?" Charlotte said, "It's the Israeli military's drone." Akiko Tsukino was curious. She had good eyesight, but she didn't see anything. Charlotte, however, had already seen the drone. Are his eyes the eyes of an eagle? Although she was curious, she didn't ask any more questions. "I didn't expect them to catch up so quickly. It looks like that couple is really most sad." Charlotte was very anxious. "I asked them what their mission was, and the guy named Heimer told his woman to kill me. I'm guessing they must be protecting the secret of the pyramid," Akiko Tsukino said. "It's very close," Charlotte said. Akiko Tsukino looked back again, but she still didn't see anything. Xia Lei's eyes quickly scanned the environment outside the car, and then he saw his eyes move in the direction of the trunk. With just a glance, Charlotte opened the door and went to the back of the car to open the trunk. He opened the trunk door. In the trunk was a bag of flour, a bottle of olive oil, and a large roll of tin foil. It was tin foil for roasting meat and bread, and it was brand new. Charlotte took out the tin foil and quickly went to the front passenger door. He opened the car door, picked up Akiko Tsukino, and ran to the bushes next to the car. What are you trying to do?" Akiko Tsukino couldn't understand Charlotte at all. Charlotte placed Akiko Tsukino in the bushes and returned to the Desert Raider. He took out both equipment bags. He did not close the door and quickly ran into the bushes. As soon as he entered the bushes, he grabbed the roll of tin foil and pulled it all out, saying, "Quick, quick, wrap your body with the tin foil. Wrap my body with tin foil." Akiko Tsukino still didn't understand Charlotte's motives. "The drone's camera has a thermal imaging function. If it captures us, Mossad will definitely send air power. At that time, we won't be able to escape from Israel." As he spoke, Charlotte had already wrapped 2 pieces of tin foil around his body. Akiko Tsukino finally understood, and she also began to wrap the tin foil around her body. In her heart, she admired Xia Lei's knowledge and adaptability on the spot. Charlotte quickly wrapped his entire body with tin foil, and then he helped Akiko Tsukino wrap her body. She had not recovered yet, and her hands and feet were not nimble. He helped her wrap her legs and her waist. Akiko Tsukino wrapped her chest with a piece of tin foil, but because it was too big, she couldn't wrap it properly twice. As soon as she let go, the tin foil would fall. Her breasts were like 2 naughty rabbits, and they just had to go against her at this time. Charlotte grabbed the tin foil and poked it with his fingers. With 2 cracking sounds, he poked 2 holes in the tin foil. Then he pressed the tin foil on Akiko Tsukino's chest, grabbed the highest part, and pulled it out. The problem was solved. Akiko Tsukino stared at Charlotte, dumbfounded. Without any explanation, Charlotte suddenly pushed her into the bushes. He lay on his back in the bushes with her. One of his hands was raised, and his arm wrapped in tin foil just covered the 2 parts that he had poked. The tin foil was rotten, and it was soft under the tin foil. That was the situation. Akiko Tsukino didn't know what to say. "Sure, it's coming. Don't move," Charlotte said. Akiko Tsukino's big, black eyes looked up at the sky through the gap of the tin foil. Just as her line of sight stopped, a Heron 2 attack drone from the Israel Defense Forces appeared in the sky. The huge wings and the surface-to-surface missiles mounted on the launcher were faintly visible. The Heron 2 drone hovered in the sky, seemingly conducting reconnaissance on the target on the ground. Its target was obviously the Desert Raider parked in the middle of the wilderness. Behind it, who knew how many people were staring at the satellite image it transmitted back? "Boss, to be honest, I really admire you." Akiko Tsukino's voice was very soft, but it was enough for Charlotte to hear clearly. Charlotte's voice was also very soft. "I actually want to live the life of an ordinary person the most." "That's impossible," Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte smiled bitterly. He also knew that it was already impossible. He was walking on a path of no return. It was just like his body. It was constantly evolving and couldn't degenerate any further. "They said that your body has evolved. Is that true?" "It's true." Charlotte looked at the sky. The Heron 2 was still hovering in the sky, but from its flight trajectory, it had expanded its reconnaissance range. There was no one in the car. The person operating it would most likely think that the people in the car had abandoned the car and escaped. Then, expanding the search range would be the best choice. Are you good at that? Akiko Tsukino's voice became even softer. Charlotte, we might die here. Tell me, I want to know. Charlotte was very embarrassed. Yes. What do you mean by yes? What do you think it means? Charlotte changed the topic. How much longer does the drone need to continue its reconnaissance? Actually, I can guess that you have 4 wives. They are very happy when they are with you. This means that you are very good, Akiko Tsukino said. Why did she ask this question? What did she want to do? At this moment, the Heron 2 drone hovering in the sky suddenly fired an anti-ground missile. The missile flew towards the Desert Raider in the wilderness with a dazzling fiery tail. Boom! The Desert Raider was blown to pieces, its wreckage and parts flying in all directions. After blowing up the Desert Raider, the Heron 2 left the sky and flew in the direction of Gaza. Charlotte got up from the ground, his expression solemn. The Mossad must have guessed that we're going to Gaza. Who knows how many Mossad and Israel Defense Forces are now on the border of Gaza? Are we still going? Charlotte thought for a moment. Going now is the same as walking right into a trap. Then where are we going? Akiko Tsukino asked. Since they all think we're going to Gaza, then let's go in the opposite direction. The most dangerous place is actually the safest place. Let's go to Jerusalem, Charlotte said. Akiko Tsukino said, even if we don't go to Gaza, we can go to Jordan. Why do we have to go to Jerusalem? Jordan's border must also be closely monitored. If you can think of it, Mossad can also think of it. We are facing a country, not an enemy. It's very easy for them to seal the border to Jordan and Gaza, Charlotte said. All right, I'll listen to you. I'm just giving you a suggestion. Even if you go to hell, I will accompany you, Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte smiled. If you want to go, you should go to heaven. Hell is not good. He reached out and helped her up. Beep, 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 beep. At that moment, Charlotte's satellite phone suddenly rang. He took out the satellite phone and answered the call. His voice was low. It's me, boss. I only have 30 seconds. Listen carefully. It was Siamu's voice. We are being chased by Mossad and are hiding in Gaza. Where are you? Charlotte said, Akiko and I are in the suburbs of Jerusalem. Don't come to Gaza. The border has been sealed and a large number of Israel Defense Forces are on the move. Charlotte frowned. Siamu's situation was exactly as he had guessed. Where are you going next? Jerusalem, Charlotte said. Can you come over? We can, but we need some time to prepare. Be careful. I'll contact you next time. Siamu hung up. Charlotte looked at his multifunction watch. The call had lasted exactly 30 seconds. Not a second more, not a second less. Siamu's purpose for calling at this time was very simple. Besides wanting to know about Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino's situation, he also wanted to remind Charlotte about the situation at the border. He was the intelligence expert of the Zodiac team, and he was also from the Middle East. He definitely had more information than Charlotte. It was Siamu's call that made Charlotte feel relieved. It was very important to him that Siamu, Yelena, and Angumi Khan were safe. The two of them left the bush, then turned around and walked in the direction of Jerusalem. However, the two took a new route, bypassing the settlement they had left before. The two were still wrapped in tinfoil, which made a squeaky sound as they walked. Akiko Tsukino looked down at the parts of her feet that were exposed through the holes in the tinfoil. She had a strange expression on her face. Her mind was not thinking about how to get to Jerusalem, but the scene of her being pulled out of the tinfoil kept replaying in her mind. Charlotte's mind was also thinking about other things. The only prehistoric tomb was found under the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and the only pyramid built before death was also found in the suburbs of Jerusalem. Also, the only prehistoric battle with Zhu Xianyue was also carried out in Jerusalem. How did I ignore the existence of Israel? What role did Israel play in this series of events? Yes, his attention had always been on the United States and the FA, and he had never paid attention to Israel. Now, Israel was in his sights, but he knew that this was not a good thing. If he had to make a choice between the CIA and Israel's Mossad, he would rather choose the CIA, Mossad style was unique in the world. Their motto was, if the enemy wanted to kill you, you should kill them first. Boss, can I take off the tinfoil? They keep ringing. Akiko Tsukino's voice interrupted Charlotte's thoughts. Charlotte said, no, keep it. Mossad will not only send one drone. Akiko Tsukino shrugged, and the parts of her feet that were exposed through the holes in the tinfoil shook. Chapter 10:17. The light of dawn had not yet arrived, and the earth and sky had entered the darkest period. On a road into Jerusalem, more than a dozen Israel Defense Forces soldiers with loaded guns were inspecting vehicles and pedestrians. They had photos of two Asians in their hands, but they were two faces that did not exist. Even the Mossad intelligence system could not find the true identity of the two faces. The two Asians in the photo were Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino, who were wanted throughout Israel. At that moment, Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino happened to be near the temporary inspection team. It's really a big effort to catch a few people who don't exist. Who gave the order? Next to a house on the side of the road, Charlotte stood in the corner of the outer wall and looked at the checkpoint about a kilometer away. He was in a bad mood. He was sure he had missed something, but he could not figure out what it was. Akiko Tsukino also moved to Charlotte's side and looked in the same direction with high-powered military binoculars. She also saw the checkpoint about a kilometer away, but she could only see lights and blurry figures. She could not see clearly at all. She could not see the situation at the checkpoint as clearly as Charlotte could with the high-power binoculars, but she also knew what the situation was over there. The road into the city has also been blocked. Akiko Tsukino frowned. The person in charge of this operation must be a big shot, and he most likely knows the secret of the pyramid. I think his goal may be the crystal skull we took from the pyramid. For some reason, the man with the king cobra tattoo suddenly appeared in Charlotte's mind. In the video shot by George, the man with the king cobra tattoo did not show his face. Only his back and the king cobra tattoo on his arm could be seen. His brain replayed the video, but what he could see was too little. Even if the man passed by him now, as long as he covered the king cobra tattoo on his arm with his sleeve, he would not be able to recognize him. Boss, what do we do now? Akiko Tsukino asked. Charlotte said, they have our photos in their hands and are comparing them to the vehicles and pedestrians passing through the checkpoint. We have to change our appearance. Then we need to find a safe place. Akiko Tsukino looked around. The place she wanted was a forest. Charlotte shifted his gaze to the house beside him. After a few seconds, he withdrew his gaze and walked towards the outer wall of the courtyard. Akiko Tsukino did not hesitate and followed Charlotte to the door. Charlotte's healing had already taken effect, and she had now recovered about 1/3 of her original state. The courtyard door was locked, but this was not a problem for Charlotte, who had learned from Qin Xiang. He used only a steel wire to open the lock. He pushed open the door and walked in with Akiko Tsukino. Akiko Tsukino pulled out the Viper pistol. No need, there's no one, Charlotte said. Akiko Tsukino was stunned for a moment. In her eyes, Charlotte was already a godlike existence. His body was full of mystery, and her curiosity about him had already swelled to the extreme. There was no one in the house, and the owner was a single man. His room was pasted with a lot of large posters of sexy girls, as well as many discs and men's magazines and a desktop computer. Charlotte opened the equipment bag and took out the makeup tools and materials from the equipment bag and placed them on the computer table. He took off the human skin mask on his face, and Akiko Tsukino did the same. Lie down and rest for a while. I'll wake you up when I'm done, Charlotte said. Akiko Tsukino nodded and lay down on the bed to rest. Her body was already very weak, and after staying up all night and walking for such a long distance, she was really tired. Charlotte reworked the two human skin masks and turned them into the faces of two Native Americans. Native Americans and Asians had the same skin color, or even more yellow, which was why he turned the two human skin masks into Native Americans. After finishing the human skin masks, Charlotte was not in a hurry to wake up Akiko Tsukino. He turned on the computer of the owner of the house. The The computer of the owner of the house did not have any protection at all, but the configuration was relatively low, far less powerful than his hacker computer. However, even if it was a normal computer, as long as his brain cooperated, he could still hack. About 10 minutes later, Charlotte entered the traffic system of Jerusalem, and the surveillance images of the roads he wanted appeared on the computer monitor. There were checkpoints on the main roads of Jerusalem, and there were also checkpoints set up by the Israel Defense Forces with live ammunition. However, no one could really surround a city, and there were some remote places where the Israel Defense Forces soldiers did not set up checkpoints. There would be no problem entering Jerusalem from those places. During this process, Charlotte had already drawn a safe route in his mind. With this safe route, he could wake up Akiko, Sakino now, take her into Jerusalem, and then find a place to wait for Saimu, Yelena, and Angumi Khan to meet up with him. After obtaining the safe route he wanted, Charlotte moved the surveillance images to Tel Aviv airport. It was not that he wanted to take a plane out of Israel, but he just wanted to see the situation at the airport. The surveillance images of Tel Aviv airport quickly appeared on the computer monitor. There were a large number of Israel Defense Forces soldiers patrolling outside the airport. Even though it was still dawn, they did not let their guard down. The situation in the departure hall was the same. Everyone waiting for their flight was under the surveillance of the police and soldiers. The Israelis even used riot dogs to sniff the hearts of the passengers. As long as there were weapons and ammunition, the dogs would give a warning. Could the Israeli president have given the order? Isn't this too much? Charlotte's lips curled into a bitter smile. He really wanted to understand how the situation had developed to such an exaggerated point, but he had no clue. At that moment, a few people suddenly walked out of the security checkpoint and entered the arrival hall. There were Mexicans, Asians, and Europeans among them. Although there were only a few of them, they were diverse. However, the surveillance images were not very clear, and he could not see the details of their faces. There are no flights to Tel Aviv airport at this time. These people are coming out of the airport at this time, so they must have taken a private plane. Who would take a private plane to Tel Aviv at this time? Charlotte was a little curious, so he enlarged the surveillance images. The quality of the enlarged surveillance images was not high, but he could clearly see the facial features of those people. Charlotte's eyes fell on one of the faces, and he was stunned. The guy he had his eyes on was an old white man. He was skinny but very spirited. His whole person was like a sharpened knife. This old man was the chief instructor of the FA organization, Augustman. Charlotte's eyes then moved to the face next to Augustman. It was an Asian face, and that guy was none other than Yen Fo, the military advisor of the FA organization. Back in the United States, Augustman and Yen Fo led the elite killers of the FA organization to chase him all the way from Washington to the Mexican border. Later, he used the Predator B to attack the convoy that went to the farm to kill him. At that time, he was sure that everyone was dead, including Augustman and Yen Fo. Later, Zelida appeared in the capital to assassinate him, and he suspected that the two were still alive. He wanted to keep Zelida alive, and one of the reasons was to ask Zelida about Augustman and Yen Fo. Unexpectedly, after Zelida blew herself up, Augustman and Yen Fo came into his sight in this way. Why are the people of the FA organization here? Moreover, they are big shots like Augustman and Yen Fo. Does the FA organization also know the secret of the Crystal Skull? If so many people know the secret of the Crystal Skull, why have they blocked the entrance to the pyramid all these years and not tried to take it away? Charlotte was confused. Indeed, if the people of the FA organization also knew the secret of the Crystal Skull with the style of the FA organization, even if taking away the Crystal Skull would cause the pyramid to collapse, and everyone who entered the pyramid would be crushed to death, they would still do it. If the FA organization knew, then how could the even more powerful CIA not know? If the CIA knew, with the strength of the United States, even if they moved the entire pyramid, they would still take away the Crystal Skull. Therefore, the possibility of these two possibilities was very low, especially the latter. However, ruling out the possibility that the FA organization knew the secret of the Crystal Skull Charlotte couldn't figure out why Augustman and UNFO would come to Israel at this time. In the surveillance screen, several people of the FA organization were stopped by several soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces. An anti-riot dog barked at Augustus, looking extremely ferocious. However, the sound of the dog barking could not be heard in the surveillance screen at all. Charlotte's eyes then locked on the surveillance screen, and he used lip reading to interpret the conversation that was about to begin. A second lieutenant spoke in English, asking Augustman and the others to show their IDs and allow a body search. Augustman did not speak, but Yin Fo asked the reason. The answer given by the second lieutenant was that he suspected they were hiding weapons on their bodies. Yin Fo stopped talking to the Israeli second lieutenant. He took out his phone and made a call. Charlotte's eyes locked on Yin Fo's lips, and he interpreted his words. "We're here. We have a little trouble at the airport. Please tell your people." Then, he handed the phone to the second lieutenant. The second lieutenant took the phone that Yin Fo handed to him. "Hello. Yes, okay." After a simple conversation, he handed the phone to Yin Fo and said, "Sorry, because I don't know the situation. You can go now. If you need me to send a car, I can arrange it for you." Only then did Augustman speak. "No need." With that, he walked to the entrance of the arrival hall. Yin Fo continued to talk to someone as he walked. 48 Holy Cross Street. "Okay, we'll meet soon." With that, he hung up the phone. Charlotte adjusted the surveillance screen to the outside of the arrival hall. Augustman and Yin Fo walked out of the arrival hall. There were already 2 Mercedes-Benz cars parked on the road outside the door. The people of the FA organization got into the 2 Mercedes-Benz cars and then drove in the direction of Jerusalem. Charlotte logged out of the surveillance system and turned off the computer. He walked to the bed, reached out, and patted Akiko Tsukino's cheek. "Hey, wake up. It's time to put on makeup." Akiko Tsukino opened her eyes. She nodded and then added, "Can you help me change my dressing? My wound is itchy." Charlotte. Chapter 10:18. The light of dawn dispelled the darkness, and sunlight returned to the ancient land. The golden sunlight shone on the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the dome of the mosque. The 2 holy places looked extremely solemn and holy. Over the past thousands of years, countless people had lost their lives because of them, and the conflict was still going on. No one knew when it would end. Jerusalem, Holy Cross Street. 2 Native Americans walked into a restaurant that sold breakfast. The 2 Native Americans looked very young. The man looked to be 22 or 23 years old, and the woman looked to be in her early 20s. The 2 of them were carrying backpacks and wearing ethnic accessories. They looked like a pair of Native Americans who had come to Israel for a holiday. The 2 Native Americans were Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino. With a human skin mask and magical makeup skills, even Charlotte couldn't recognize himself, let alone the people who wanted to catch him. The 2 sat down at a table next to the window. Charlotte ordered and looked out the window at the street outside. 48 Holy Cross Street was just across the street. It was a very old house that looked like it had been around for hundreds of years. The main body was made of stone. There were 3 floors, and the 2 sides extended forward, forming a concave shape. Such a house could have been the mansion of a knight or lord during the Crusades. It also looked like a French medieval architectural style. Now, who was the owner of this house? On this point, the 2 armed Israeli soldiers standing at the door had already given the answer. The Israeli government was the current owner of this old house. The armed soldiers guarding the door meant that this place was not an ordinary place. However, Charlotte did not see any signs, such as Jerusalem Holy Cross Street Office or Jerusalem Holy Cross Street Committee. If only Siamu was here. He must know what kind of place this is, Charlotte thought. He was looking forward to meeting up with Siamu, Yelena, and Angumi Khan. The waiter brought the food. It was a traditional Israeli breakfast: sour olives, salted fish, and egg custard. Charlotte ate as he continued to observe the old building across from him. This time, he awakened the ability of his left eye and let his gaze penetrate the closed and curtained window. He was shocked by what he saw. The old building across from him was a very modern office. In the central hall on the first floor, there was a television wall that took up almost the entire wall. It showed surveillance footage from important places in Jerusalem, such as bus stations, airports, and so on. There were almost no blind spots. In addition, there were more advanced satellite surveillance images that covered all of Israel, including Jordan, the Gaza Strip, and the area bordering Egypt. There were many staff members working in the hall. Some were answering phones, some were operating drones, and some were dispatching field personnel on the ground. It looked very busy, but the scene was orderly and extremely strict. In fact, just by looking at the central hall, Xiaolei could already deduce that this seemingly ordinary ancient building was not an ordinary government agency, but an intelligence agency. Charlotte's gaze moved to the second floor. He saw some offices and an equipment warehouse. There were some people working in the office, but he didn't know any of them. He didn't see anyone from the FA organization on the second floor. He moved his gaze to the third floor and looked through the window on the third floor. The third floor was a multi-purpose area. There was a training ground for fighting and a place for treatment. Some people were training their fighting skills, and some were treating their injuries. His gaze swept through all the windows on the third floor. Charlotte still didn't see anyone from the FA organization. He withdrew his gaze. He couldn't see through the thick stone walls and mud to see what was going on underground, but there must be a space underground. Is this the headquarters of the Mossad, or a very important subbase? Who did the FA organization come here to see? Charlotte was confused. The FA organization was now equivalent to a dog of the United States. It wasn't a problem for them to come to Israel and contact the people of the Mossad. But the problem was that Yin, FO, and Augustman, who came to Israel, were both very important figures of the FA organization. What was their purpose in coming to Israel? Charlotte naturally thought that they were here to kill him. But this idea was quickly erased by him because he was already dead. He was assassinated by Eugene Lee in China. His funeral was held in China, and the whole country mourned him. The level of this show was so high. How could the people of the FA organization suspect that he was still alive and chase him to Israel? In fact, his trip to Israel this time was hidden from even Liang Xiao and Long Bing. His women didn't know, so how could the people of the FA organization know? There must be some other reason. What the hell is this? It tastes so bad. Akiko Tsukino spat out a sour olive. She was so sour that she was about to cry. She had also observed the old building opposite, but she didn't find anything. Charlotte lowered his voice. Israel's climate is dry, water is scarce, and food is scarce. Most of the food is pickled, so make do with it. When you leave here, you can eat whatever you want. Also, you must communicate in English. The building opposite is the place of the Mossad. Be careful of your every move. Akiko Tsukino looked at the old building opposite in surprise, then nodded. She didn't know how Charlotte knew that the old building opposite was the place of the Mossad, but she believed in Charlotte. Just then, an Israeli man walked out of the old building opposite and went straight to the restaurant. Charlotte's gaze moved to the Israeli man, and in almost 2 seconds, he conducted a comprehensive examination on him. The Israeli man had a Desert Eagle and a pass card with his name on it, Hallie. There were many wounds on his body, including gunshot wounds and knife wounds. Based on his age in his 30s, it wasn't difficult to tell that he was a veteran Special Forces soldier who had joined the Mossad after retiring. A considerable part of the Mossad's spies and agents were recruited from retired Special Forces soldiers. They were battle-hardened and experienced. When they went to the Mossad to receive higher levels of training, their comprehensive strength could be imagined. In the world of spies and agents, there was a popular saying that the Mossad's ability to collect intelligence, assassinate, and steal was the strongest. The equally famous American CIA, Britain's MI6, and Russia's Russian Federal Security Service, Krupp, couldn't compare. Therefore, even if an ordinary agent appeared in his field of vision, Charlotte would be alert. He nudged Akiko Tsukino under the table. Don't talk. The people from the Mossad are here. Akiko Tsukino nodded. She could also tell that Hallie, who was crossing the road, wasn't an ordinary person. She had her way. Hallie crossed the road and entered the restaurant. A waiter greeted him with a smile. "Mr. Hallie, is it the same this time?" "Yes, the same." Hallie's gaze quickly swept across the restaurant and finally stopped at the table where Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino were sitting. Charlotte didn't look at him as he ate the egg soup with a spoon. His gaze was fixed on the reflective surface of the stainless steel spoon, observing Hallie through the reflection. The waiter said to the direction of the kitchen, "Mr. Hade's breakfast, the same as always, sour olives and hard bread." Hallie withdrew his gaze from Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino. In terms of the ability to disguise, if Charlotte called himself the second best in the world, then no one in the world would dare to call themselves the best. His disguise as Lee Yuden could fool the CIB's spies, and he could even fool the extremely cunning Mai Hattori. Fooling a Mossad agent wasn't a problem at all. The kitchen quickly prepared the food that Hallie wanted, sour olives and hard bread, but it wasn't on a plate, but in a cardboard box with a plastic bag on the outside. Hallie took the food, paid for it, and walked out with the food. But when Hallie crossed the parallel line, Charlotte's gaze shifted to Hallie's back and instantly awakened his X-ray vision. His gaze cut open Hallie's back and went straight to his stomach. He saw a wriggling stomach filled with sausages, cheese, and waffles. Seeing the type of food in the stomach so clearly, Hallie had clearly just had breakfast. Why would he buy breakfast? And why would he buy disgusting and cheap sour olives and hard bread? At this moment, the waiter was chatting with his colleague. He said, "What a strange guy, buying the same food every day. I've worked here for 3 years, and he buys the same food every day. Is he that interested in sour olives and hard bread? I've seen the car he's driving. It looks like a Toyota Jeep, worth $200,000 in IS." His colleague said, "Yeah, high-paid government worker, but he's interested in junk food." "Hey, don't say that. There are customers in the shop. Are you talking about those 2 Native Americans? It would be strange if they understood what we're talking about." He just ordered in English. "That's true. Well, the people in the opposite building are very strange." The 2 waiters chatted casually, and soon, the topic shifted to a girl they both knew. Charlotte lost interest in eavesdropping, and his gaze moved to the opposite building again. If it weren't for the conversation between the 2 waiters and the information he had just captured, he wouldn't have thought that Hallie buying breakfast was so strange. Hallie had indeed eaten breakfast, but he might have bought it for a colleague, and that person was interested in sour olives and hard bread. But after hearing the conversation between the 2 waiters, he didn't think so. For 3 years, he bought the same food almost every morning. Even if Hallie didn't eat it himself, he shouldn't have such a perverted colleague, right? Who would eat junk food every day. A keyword suddenly emerged in Charlotte's mind: prisoner. Only prisoners would eat awful junk food and eat the same junk food every day because they had no choice because of punishment. After the keyword prisoner emerged in his mind, Charlotte's thoughts were suddenly activated. The young waiter said that he had been here for 3 years, and Hallie had bought the same sour olives and hard bread for 3 years. So the prisoner had been locked up for more than 3 years. There was no trial, and he wasn't sent to prison, but he had been locked up in the headquarters or a branch of Mossad. What was the identity of that person? Why was he treated like this? The FA organization came to Israel at this time and contacted the people of Mossad. Could it be for the prisoner? He couldn't figure it out, but Charlotte already had an impulse in his heart. He wanted to see the prisoner, not for anything else, but because of the involvement of the FA organization. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. However, this was still just a bold guess. Whether there was a prisoner or not, it needed to be proven. "Let's go." Charlotte got up. Akiko Tsukino put down the spoon, then got up and left with Charlotte. Chapter 1019. A high-end and safe residence, a modified off-road vehicle for action, and a hacker's computer with the highest configuration. In this world, as long as you had money, you could buy most things. In the presidential suite of the Hilton Hotel, Charlotte's fingers were typing on the new hacker's computer. The monitor of the hacker's computer quickly displayed a set of traffic surveillance footage, which was the surveillance footage of number 48 Holy Cross Road. The old building was quiet at night. Some windows were lit, but the people behind the windows could not be seen. There were two armed Special Forces soldiers standing at the gate, but they were no longer the two in the morning. They had been replaced. Charlotte quickly pulled up the surveillance footage of the day and then looked for the faces of Yin-FO and Augustman from the FA organization. However, he only saw the FA organization's car enter, but not come out. Until he finished fast-forwarding the surveillance footage, he couldn't find the faces of the two guys, Augustman and Yin-FO. Those two guys only go in and don't come out. What are they doing inside? Charlotte couldn't help but guess. And then he thought of the keyword, prisoner. Drip, drip, drip. The sound of water coming from the bathroom interrupted Charlotte's thoughts. He suddenly remembered something, and he said to the bathroom, Akiko, your wound hasn't healed yet. How can you take a shower? Your wound will fester easily if it gets wet. Don't wash it. Come out quickly. Akiko Tsukino's voice came from the bathroom. It's okay. I wrap but with plastic wrap. Charlotte, his brain couldn't help but imagine the Japanese ninja's big white ball wrapped in a layer of plastic wrap. Also, the plastic wrap should be transparent, right? Oh, water got in. The Japanese ninja's voice came from the bathroom again, sounding very annoyed. Charlotte smiled bitterly and didn't respond. So be it. She asked for it. Who told her not to wrap her, but properly? Charlotte's eyes moved to the hacker's computer again, and then he started a new operation. A stock trading app popped up. Ever since he started preparing for his death, he hadn't paid attention to his gains in the U.S. stock market. But in fact, he also made arrangements. Before he began to prepare for his death, he used the hypnosis command given by Zhu Xianyue to activate the puppet Hornick he placed in Wall Street. Hornick was a senior securities manager with an annual salary of more than $1 million. It was not a big problem to activate the accounts of the four female knights. It was just that the money they earned could not be compared to his. Charlotte soon checked the funds in the accounts of the four female knights. The total funds in their accounts were $188 billion. $1 billion USD is one group shares, and the rest is Google, Apple, and Microsoft shares. Before he activated Hornick, the total amount of funds in the accounts of the four female knights had already reached $0.99 billion USD. Hornick only helped him earn tens of millions of USD, and that was on the basis of the foundation he laid. But even so, Hornick's strength was still top-notch. Before activating Hornick, Charlotte heavily invested in Wanxiang Group's shares. He didn't touch Google, Apple, and Microsoft shares at all. But now, Hornick was gradually dumping Wanxiang Group shares and speeding up the process of buying Google, Apple, and Microsoft shares. If this continues, in a few days, Hornick will dump all of Wanxiang Group shares and buy all of Google, Apple, and Microsoft shares. Now Wanxiang Group's shares have fallen to $8, and the downward trend is still very serious. The market prospects are bleak. In the face of such a situation, Charlotte can't blame Hornick, because Hornick has other people's experience and operating methods. He has so much funds in his account. As a senior securities manager, Hornick's first thought is the safety of funds, followed by profits, and a stable way of making profits. But he can bite his opponent on the battlefield like a hungry wolf. I don't know if Tianyin will think that I don't want to help her, so I dumped Wanxiang Group's shares. Charlotte shook his head. No, in her eyes, I'm already dead. How could she think of this? Charlotte turned off the stock trading software. He didn't intend to correct his puppet's operation, because now is not the time to make money, but the time to fight. Akiko Tsukino was still taking a bath in a bathroom, and she was humming a Japanese folk song. The general meaning of the song was that a young woman was taking a bath, and her lover was peeping at the door. She hit him with the soap, but accidentally fell to the ground. But made a paw sound, paw sound, paw sound. It hurts, it hurts, it hurts. The lyrics were very magical. Charlotte smiled bitterly and shook his head. He turned on the TV and continued to monitor 48 Holy Cross Road while watching TV. The TV was playing a news program, and a blonde Israeli anchor read the news in Hebrew. China's father of rifles, the vice president of the Academy of Sciences, the founder and chairman of Rema Group, Charlotte, was assassinated. His funeral was held in Kyoto, and the whole country mourned. The picture on the TV switched to the scene of the funeral. Charlotte was lying in a coffin, and his face was pale and bloodless. White roses and white chrysanthemums were piled up beside him. Fan Fan was wearing mourning clothes, standing next to the coffin and weeping. Liang Xiao, Long Bing, and Jiang Rui accompanied her. They didn't wear mourning clothes, but only wore mourning clothes. There were many big figures at the funeral, some from the political world, some from the military, but no one from the business world. The guests at the funeral looked very simple, and the personnel situation was not complicated. This situation was very normal. The people above knew that he was faking his death, so they deliberately played along with him. Of course, the people above would not want people with ulterior motives to sneak into the funeral and find out. This was a national blockbuster, just like the incident during the Cold War when the United States tricked the Soviet Union into landing on the moon. Akiko Tsukino walked out of the bathroom, wrapped in a thin bath towel. The bath towel was tied in a half knot on her chest, and the extra part was stuffed in her chest so that at least a third of her snow-white skin was exposed. The half knot was very loose, as if it could fall at any time. The bath towel wasn't long, and it only covered her pert buttocks. The size of the miniskirt was a little short. Under it, her snow-white legs were exposed to the air without any cover, and they were natural and unrestrained, allowing people to admire them. Her legs weren't as beautiful as Liang Xiao's, but they weren't bad either. She was petite, but her legs were very long. Charlotte took a look, then looked away awkwardly. He continued to watch the television. The news about his death had ended, and it was replaced by news in Israel. The content was actually the explosion that happened in a settlement on the outskirts of Jerusalem last night. Last night, there was an explosion in the suburbs of Jerusalem. A doctor and his wife were killed on the spot, as well as more than a dozen militiamen. The police have initially determined that this was a terrorist attack, and the suspects are two Asians. If any citizens discover this clue, please contact the police immediately. A sketch of a Chinese man and woman appeared on the television. It was the drawing of Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino's last makeup appearance. A sneer appeared on Charlotte's lips. The suspect had changed from Asian to Native American. How could the people of Israel discover him and Akiko Tsukino, and then provide clues to the police? Akiko Tsukino sat down beside Charlotte and wiped the water from her hair with a towel. Her body smelled fragrant. The smell wasn't very strong, but it was alluring enough. "Boss, help me bandage my wound." "It's in the water," Akiko Tsukino said. She also pretended to watch the television, but the corner of her eye was on Charlotte. Charlotte was also watching the television, but the corner of his eye was on Akiko Tsukino's legs. She was sitting, and the bath towel was naturally pulled up. It was already very short, and when it was pulled up, it was even shorter. In that case, what was the point of its existence? He knew that he shouldn't be doing this, but he couldn't control his eyes at all. He felt like a cat with a plump fish in front of it. Was there a cat in this world that didn't want to eat fish? If he wanted to eat the fish in front of him, he could eat it immediately. And it was the Japanese way of eating, sashimi, and so on. However, when he thought of the 4 pregnant women at home, he had to endure it and take care of the rest of his life. Charlotte got up. "I'll go get the medicine box. Don't you want to take a look at the wound first?" Akiko Tsukino said. Then she got up from the sofa, raised her hips, and pulled up the bath towel herself. In that second, Charlotte's heart was completely in a mess. The line of defense that he had painstakingly built was also shaking, and it could collapse at any time. Akiko Tsukino's wound had already scabbed, and it was healed. Her so-called bandaging of the wound was not necessary at all. Xiao Lei understood what she was thinking. She wanted to fulfill the promise he had made in the pyramid, but wasn't that promise just a mess? He had never made that kind of promise. Akiko Tsukino turned around and looked at Charlotte with tender eyes. "Just this once, fulfill my wish, okay?" Charlotte's first reaction was to shake his head, but his head seemed to be filled with lead. It was very heavy, and he couldn't shake it at all. He was facing a woman who was willing to die for him at any time. She was attracted to him, she liked him, and she only had this one wish. How could he have the heart to reject her? Akiko Tsukino smiled. Don't worry, your wives won't know, I promise you. Charlotte nodded his head gently. It was just a gentle nod, and even he himself wondered if he had nodded. However, this did not affect the Japanese ninja's judgment. Her face showed a sweet and excited smile, and then she reached out to grab the simple half knot and gently pulled it out. The bath towel slipped from her jade-like skin and fell to the ground without a sound. Charlotte was stunned. In his eyes, she was as beautiful as a cherry blossom at the foot of Mount Fuji in Japan. She was snow-white and delicate, like a living flower fairy. She was humble and docile. She was tough and brave, and she was mature and seductive. She leaned toward him and kissed him on the lips. He froze for a moment, and then he was like an enraged beast. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. The doorbell suddenly rang. Chapter 10:20. Charlotte closed the door. How did you find this place? Saimu shook his head. I don't know. I'm from the Arab world, and I'm an enemy of Israel. I don't know much about the situation in Jerusalem, and I don't dare to develop my intelligence system here. Mossad, who will want to go against Mossad? Why are you apologizing to me? Akiko Tsukino held his face. That time doesn't count. In the living room, Yelena, Angumi Khan, and Saimu were already sitting on the sofa waiting for him. Akiko Tsukino nodded with a smile and bowed to send Charlotte away. The humility and meekness of a Japanese woman was displayed in her. Akiko Tsukino got up, bounced her legs, and her petite body flew towards Charlotte. Her legs spread out in the air, and like a sharp pair of scissors, she clamped Charlotte's neck. In just a second, her legs rested on Charlotte's shoulders, and her buttocks rested in a position parallel to his neck. Akiko Tsukino returned to her room. Charlotte said a few words to Angumi Khan, then got up and went to Akiko Tsukino's room. He didn't knock on the door. When he pushed the door open and entered, Akiko Tsukino was lying on the bed, her buttocks and slender waist forming a seductive wavy curve. She pressed her head with a pillow, knowing that someone had come in, but she didn't look back. Yelena reached out and patted Charlotte's shoulder, whispering, "There's a strand of her hair on your shoulder. I've taken off for you. You're welcome." Akiko Tsukino glared at him, but she wasn't really angry. Charlotte said, "That's why I want to find out who the prisoner is. I suspect that the FA organization's appearance here has something to do with our operation." Charlotte lowered his voice. "It's Yelena, Saimu, and Angumi Khan. They're here." A mysterious smile appeared on Yelena's face. She knew the secret, but she didn't want to say it. 2 centimeters. "Boss." Angumi Khan came out of the storage space under the dining car and said with a smile, "You must not know that I'm here too, right?" Yelena smiled. "Boss, why are you doing this? The Zodiac Squad does not need such hypocritical democracy. You are our leader, our boss. Whatever you say, we will do. We'll listen to you." Yelena said, "After you went in, the satellite phone had no signal at all. We couldn't contact you and Akiko. That place has been monitored. Not long after you went in, we found Mossad's people. We couldn't contact you, but in that case, we had to distract Mossad's people. Otherwise, if they found out that you went in, they only needed to guard the exit, and you had no chance to escape." Charlotte had expected Saimu to provide more information, but he didn't expect it to be like this. He said, "Okay, then I'll tell you." He pointed to the screen. "I suspect that it's the headquarters of Mossad, or a branch base." She was like a pink flea. Akiko Tsukino's waist suddenly leaned back, and her upper body bent like a bow. Her hands were on Charlotte's thighs, and then she left Charlotte's body with a beautiful dance movement. Walking out of the door, Charlotte secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Then he used his ability to control his nerves to make his body return to normal. He had to do this, because if he did nothing, Angumi Khan and Saimu would easily find out the secret between him and Akiko Tsukino. Angumi Khan was fine, but Saimu was a problem. He also knew that Saimu liked Akiko Tsukino. Now, he didn't know how to deal with this kind of thing. This problem gave him a headache just thinking about it. Only then did Charlotte come to his senses. He hurriedly climbed up from Akiko, Tsukino's body. Yelena reached out and pressed the doorbell again. Charlotte bit the bullet and said, "Akiko, just now. I'm sorry, I was too impulsive." But he still endured it and bit the bullet and said, "Akiko, I'm sorry." Akiko Tsukino couldn't see it, but Charlotte did. Two hotel waiters, a man and a woman, were standing outside the door, pushing a dining cart. His eyes swept over the faces of the two waiters, and his tense nerves suddenly relaxed. Charlotte said, "Engumi-kan, you can stay. Yelena and Sayamu, you can leave for a while. Go back and change your clothes before coming back. Don't worry about the surveillance cameras in the corridor. I will make them blind." Only then did Akiko Tsukino take the pillow away. She turned over and looked at Charlotte with hot eyes. Her posture changed, and so did her curves. Her chest and flat lower abdomen formed a graceful curve. The Japanese ninja's body was so mature and attractive no matter from which angle, without any blind spots. Akiko Tsukino's mouth suddenly curled up. Since Angumi-kan said so, she really couldn't find any excuse to drive him out. She was obviously very unhappy. Why was it so difficult to realize her wish? Charlotte said, "Don't you know? Charlotte, whoever got her heart, she would unlock all the positions for that person." The man and the woman who were entangled suddenly stopped and looked nervously in the direction of the door. The smile on Yelena's face became more mysterious. She knew why Akiko Tsukino wanted her, Sayamu, and Angumi-kan to leave, but she still didn't say it. At this time, Yelena suddenly came to Charlotte's side and then said in his ear, "Boss, what were you doing with Akiko just now?" "I was hiding in the dining car. The surveillance didn't capture me, so I can stay," said Angumi-kan. "Akiko, are you okay?" Sayamu asked with concern. "What is this place?" Sayamu asked curiously. Yelena, Sayamu, and Angumi-kan looked at the crystal skull in shock. Charlotte said, "Come in." Yelena, Sayamu, and Angumi-kan all nodded. "I agree." Akiko Tsukino's voice came from behind. She changed her clothes again. It was a very normal set of casual clothes. Charlotte walked over. He put his hacker computer on the coffee table in front of the three of them and opened the screen. Ding dong, ding dong. Akiko Tsukino said, "Leave here. There are surveillance cameras in the corridor. You can't stay here for a long time." Akiko Tsukino's eyes showed disappointment, but this was Charlotte's decision. She would not oppose it. Yelena said, "Boss, didn't you already know about this? Why are you asking such a question? You don't look well. What's going on?" Love between men and women was like this. Liking someone didn't mean that they could be together. Sometimes you like someone, but your secret love and your feelings were not needed at all. Was this the meaning of her body language? Sayamu said, "You have the satellite phone on. Of course we can find you." Charlotte's heart was in a mess. He didn't know if this was the meaning, but he was clear that the Japanese female ninja was trying to capture him in her own way. And he was really a little tempted. After the screen woke up, it showed a surveillance video. It was the surveillance video of number 48 Holy Cross Road. At this time, Akiko Tsukino came out of her room. She had put on gym shorts and a vest, deliberately creating the illusion that she had just been exercising. She came out and looked very surprised. "Yelena, why are you here?" "Who?" Akiko Tsukino was still in a state of high tension. Xiaolei's heart was moved. He picked up a backpack next to the sofa and put it on the coffee table. Then he unzipped it and took out the crystal skull. Xiaolei shrugged with an innocent look on his face. Who else but Charlotte would dare to walk into her room like this? Therefore, she didn't need to look back to know who had entered her room. "Boss, what do you want to do?" Yelena asked. Charlotte said, "In the early hours of this morning, I found people from the FA organization in contact with people from Mossad, and then they entered this building. I have been to this street with Akiko. I accidentally got a piece of information that there is a very important prisoner here. I am afraid that the people from the FA organization are here for that prisoner." Charlotte smiled. "I can smell your curry when you're still outside the door. Do you think I know you are here?" Yelena and Sayama left, but Angumi-kan stayed. Akiko Tsukino quickly got up from the sofa, then grabbed the bath towel that had fallen on the ground and ran to her room as if she was escaping. Charlotte's eyes then moved to the dining car. Sure enough, as he had guessed, the Indian monkey Angumi-kan was hiding in the storage space under the dining car. Charlotte changed the topic. Tell me, what happened the day before yesterday? When Akiko and I came out, we couldn't see you, and we couldn't contact you. Then the Israeli soldiers appeared. Yelena, who was standing at the door, saw that it was a Native American who opened the door. She actually stretched her hand to the back of her waist. It was a subconscious action to pull out a gun. Charlotte's mind was full of Akiko Tsukino's big white ball and whatever. It would be strange if he was in a state of mind. He asked such a question just to divert the attention of his men. Yelena said, "Then let's kill them." Akiko Tsukino said lightly, "I'm fine." She didn't say much. She knew that Sayamo liked her, but she didn't have any feelings for Sayamo. Not to mention that she had a 2-centimeter relationship with Charlotte. How could she and Sayamo have that kind of relationship? "Boss, they're here." Angumi-kan's voice came from the direction of the living room. Angumi-kan and Sayamo also said, "Yes, we'll listen to you. What you guys did was right. No matter what we went through, it's fine as long as we're safe," Charlotte said. Angumi-kan shrugged. "I haven't eaten curry for a few days. How could I smell curry? Akiko, can you smell curry on me?" When he spoke, Yelena and Sayamo, who were at the door, immediately reacted. The two of them pushed the dining cart into the room. They didn't speak because there was a surveillance camera in the corridor. Charlotte was speechless. Charlotte could have avoided it, but he didn't. He felt that he had done something wrong, and it was only right for her to vent. He was such a person. The first thing he considered was other people's feelings, and then his own. But his indulgence made things even more awkward, because Akiko Tsukino was wearing stretch cotton sports shorts. The extremely thin fabric was like a second layer of skin for her. It exposed some parts of her body, and it was in any shape it should be. Under her deadly scissor leg posture, the elastic cotton fabric tightened. That scene was so stimulating that he couldn't help but want to see it. Akiko Tsukino also breathed a sigh of relief, but then she frowned. These guys, why at this time? Charlotte also tidied himself up and then walked over to open the door. There were two waiters. The man was Sayamo, and the woman was Yelena. Charlotte walked to her bedside and coughed softly. "Akiko, just now." Charlotte was silent for a moment before he said, "This is very dangerous. I can't let you take such a risk because of me. How about this? We vote to decide. If you don't agree, we won't go." Charlotte said, "I'll go out and have a look. You can change your clothes and come out too." Angumi-kan said in surprise, "Boss, you're not thinking of attacking the Mossad's headquarters to rescue the prisoner who we don't even know, are you?" Akiko Tsukino couldn't see what was going on outside the door. She subconsciously reached for her gun, but then she realized that she didn't have a gun. When she came, she only had a bath towel on her, and now it was on the carpet. A chicken was a chicken. She had a strong ability in this aspect. No, Charlotte actually felt guilty. Chapter 10:21. There was a little rain in the morning, and the dry Jerusalem was moisturized. The ancient city also had a touch of spring. Hud walked out of the restaurant with a bag of food in his hand. The bag was filled with sour olives and a piece of black, hard bread. He crossed the street and walked into 48 Holy Cross Road. The two SWAT soldiers guarding the door greeted him, and he smiled. He walked through the lobby and entered a corridor. At the end of the corridor was a stone staircase. He walked down the stone staircase and entered another corridor. The corridor was dim, and the air was humid. The stone floor didn't feel dry either. On both sides of the corridor were cells, very old cells. Some of the stone walls were carved with Arabic words, meaning God is eternal, long live God, and so on. There were also some wishes, such as regaining freedom, finding love, or a piece of land. Judging from the inscriptions carved on the walls, this place was probably used to imprison prisoners from the Arab world during the Crusades. It was a chaotic time when one god fought another. Hud kept walking. At the end of the corridor, There was a door made of wood and iron. The wood was very thick, and the iron was also very thick. It looked very sturdy. There were two braziers on both sides of the door. They were made of copper and had the insignia of the Crusaders on them. They looked very old, but they were no longer in use. They were just decorations on the wall. Instead, they were replaced by an LED ceiling lamp. The white light illuminated the space, and it looked very cold. Hud walked to the iron door. He opened it with a key and walked in with a bag of food. Behind the iron door was a cell about 20 square meters. There was no bed, just some weeds on the floor. A man lay in the weeds. He was thin and dressed in rags. His messy hair reached his waist. From his hair, it wasn't hard to tell that he had been locked up here for a long time. It could have been years, or even 10. There was a wooden bucket in the corner of the cell. It was filled with excrement, and the smell was very unpleasant. But the long-haired man was sleeping soundly. He didn't even bat an eyelid when Hud came in. Hud threw the plastic bag on the grass, then kicked the long-haired man's thigh and said rudely, "Hey, bastard, your food is here. Damn it, get up and eat. You have a visitor today." "Who is it?" The long-haired man finally opened his eyes. "Cut the crap," Har berated. The man suddenly jumped up from the haystack and kicked at the vital spot between Hard's legs. When he was lying on the ground, he was like a dead dog that had his tendons pulled out and his bones broken. He had no strength left in his body. However, when he attacked, he was like a venomous snake lurking in the grass. It was fine if he didn't move, but once he moved, he would take someone's life. Hud jerked back. "Kacha!" The long-haired man's leg was suddenly grabbed by the chain. His toes were only 2 centimeters away from Hard's vitals, but he couldn't kick past those 2 centimeters. The chain that imprisoned him was only so long, not even a centimeter longer. Even so, Hard was still frightened by him. Furious, he pulled out a Desert Eagle and pointed the gun at the long-haired man's head. "Bastard, do you really think I won't dare to kill you?" The long-haired man raised his hand and parted the dirty hair that covered his face, revealing his face. It was a thin face with a long beard. It made him look like a man who was almost 50 years old. However, there were no wrinkles at the corners of his eyes. That was a sign of youth. He looked terrible, but his eyes were very sharp, like the eyes of a bloodthirsty beast. There was a king cobra tattoo on his raised arm. It had a green body, red eyes, and a tongue. It looked very ferocious. "If you dare to kill me, you don't have to deliver food to me. You're just an errand boy. Why are you pretending to be someone important?" The long-haired man finally spoke. His voice was hoarse and cold, full of disdain. Hard suddenly stepped forward and used the gun handle to smash the long-haired man's head. The long-haired man looked at Hard without moving. His lips curled into a cold smile. Hard suddenly realized something. He stopped his attack and retreated to the safe zone. He smiled and shook his head. "I won't fall for your trick. That guy you killed 3 years ago. How long did it take you to anger him?" 2 years, the long-haired man said. "You're smarter, but I think it's only temporary. One day, I will kill you. If I can escape, I will imprison your wife and children. I will feed them sour olives and hard bread every day. I will let your wife have a taste of my big bird. She will love it." Hard suppressed the anger in his heart. "You're dreaming. You won't be able to escape in this lifetime. This is your end. I advise you to tell me everything you know. As long as you tell me, you will be able to end this pain. You can go to hell sooner." The long-haired man glanced at the bag of food Hard had thrown on the ground. His eyes flashed with hatred. Then he lifted his foot and stomped on it. The plastic bag of food broke, the hard bread was flattened, and many of the sour olives were crushed. Hard laughed coldly. "Don't do something so pointless. It's not like you haven't done it before. You're wasting food now, but you'll eat it all by nightfall. What I brought you is enough food for a day. A normal person would only be able to eat 1 meal. You're always in a state of hunger. Not to mention this kind of junk food. Even if you were given a dead mouse, you would still eat it." Scram. The long-haired man laid down on the grass again. He couldn't even be bothered to look at Hard again. At this moment, the ironwood door was opened again, and 3 people walked in. Hard only recognized one of them. And it was the one he recognized that made him immediately stand straight and salute. He said respectfully, Mr. Kearns. He said that the person he knew was called Kearns. He was tall, in his 40s, and looked very capable. He was a senior intelligence officer in Israel's Mossad. His position was second only to the director of the Israeli Intelligence and Special Mission Bureau, Abora. He was also the leader of the Mossad. The two people who followed Kearns in were Yin, F.O., and Augustman. Hud, get out, Kearns said in a commanding tone. Yes. Hard turned and left the cell. After Hard left, Kearns said, It's this Jiawa. He doesn't have a name. We call him Hyena. He's been in Guantanamo Bay for 5 years, and we've been here for 5 years. But neither the Americans nor we can make him talk. He's the one who found the AE capsule? Yin F.O. asked. Kearns nodded. That's him. But until now, we still don't know where he found the AE capsule or how he knew about its existence. He killed everyone who knew about the situation. He knew the truth, but he didn't want to say it. I think I have a way to make him talk. Yin F.O. said. At this time, the long-haired man lying in the weeds opened his eyes. He glanced at Yin F.O., and a disdainful smile appeared on his lips. The Americans in Guantanamo Bay couldn't make him talk. The people in Israel's Mossad also couldn't make him talk. What made this guy in front of him so confident? Yin F.O. also looked at the long-haired man, and a cold smile appeared on his lips. I know that the Americans and the Mossad can't make you talk, but I want to tell you that I'm not them. Have you heard of the FA organization? I specialize in this in the FA organization. From the first person I interrogated until now, no one has disappointed me. I think you're no exception. The long-haired man suddenly stood up and reached out to grab Yin Fo's neck. His nails were very long, like the claws of a wolf made of engineering plastic. Yin Fo didn't move. Augustman punched at him. Bang! Augustman's fist hit the long-haired man's palm like a cannonball. With a muffled sound, the long-haired man's body was lifted off the ground and hit the stone wall hard. His right arm fell to his side. Just now, when Augustman's fist hit his right palm, there was the sound of bones breaking in his right palm and arm. The chief instructor of the FA organization and the world's top killers like Knight Masha and Sarita were his disciples. It was not hard to imagine how strong he was. The long-haired man looked at Augustman in amazement. Who are you? Augustman said lightly. You are a man who is about to die. Does it mean anything to you to ask my name? What you need is relief, not an answer. The long-haired man said, People of the FA organization, I know of your existence. You want to know the secrets you want to know from my mouth? Dream on. Then let's try. Yin Fo said, his eyes full of confidence. It was a very strange kind of confidence, and it looked very abnormal. But this kind of look only lasted for about a second, after which it returned to normal. Kearns said, This guy has given us a headache. When you plan to start? We are waiting for Mr. Williams' instructions. Yin Fo said, He will probably find us a U.S. military base and do this within his control. Kearns suddenly frowned. This is not what we agreed on before. The secrets this guy knows are very important to us. Do you want to keep those secrets to yourself? No. No matter what I ask, Mossad will get the same share. I don't need to explain the relationship between the U.S. and Israel, right? Yin Fo said. Kearns thought for a moment and said, I have to keep an eye on him myself. Yin Fo said, No problem. When can we take him away? I have to report to Mr. Igbala. As for the specific time, you can wait for my notice. Kearns said. Yin Fo and Augustman looked at each other and nodded. Chapter 1022. Half an hour ago, a Native American couple entered from the corner of Holy Cross Road and walked slowly along the sidewalk. The petite Native American girl held the Native American boy's arm affectionately. She didn't mind the intimate contact between the boy's arm and her chest. He went in. Akiko Sakino said he probably bought the same food, sour olives, and har bread. Charlotte said, It is indeed the same food. That guy's name is Hard. He is torturing the prisoner in this way. A prisoner that the FA organization is interested in, and at this time, I'm very curious about who the prisoner is, but I can't guess, said Akiko Tsukino. Charlotte said, At this time, what do you mean? After the collapse of the pyramid, said Akiko Tsukino. Charlotte smiled. You forgot one thing. What did I forget? Akiko Tsukino looked at Charlotte curiously. I'm already dead. Charlotte said, I am dead, but the CIA will not give up. Their target is no longer me, but the source of the AE capsule. They want to find out what happened that year and find clues from it. So the people from the FA organization came. The FA organization is now a dog of the U.S. government. You were right. I forgot this point, said Akiko Tsukino. She ignored this point, but gave Charlotte 2 more points. She held Charlotte's arm tighter. Charlotte was a little embarrassed, but he could only accept it. This was the result of his impulsiveness that night. Although it was only 2 centimeters, it was enough for the Japanese woman to confirm some kind of relationship. Not to mention that he was now playing a couple with her. The two walked into Holy Cross Street, which was a restaurant opposite Building 48. Charlotte ordered and then ate breakfast with Akiko Tsukino. He ate very slowly, and as he ate, he used his X-ray vision to observe the situation in Building 48. Akiko Tsukino observed the situation in the restaurant from the corner of her eye. A waiter came over with 2 egg tarts. Akiko Tsukino kicked Charlotte under the table. Charlotte smiled, indicating that he understood. Hello, sir. Mississippi, the waiter said politely. Thank you for your support. This is already the 2nd time you've come here for breakfast. This is our gift to you for the egg tarts. I hope you'll like it. Charlotte nodded and said in English, thank you. The waitress placed 2 egg tarts next to Xiaolei and Tsukino Takako's plates respectively. She then asked casually, Sir, miss, are you from the United States? Xiaolei said, Yes, we are from Pine Ridge, South Dakota. We are the Sioux. I haven't been to that place, but I think it must be beautiful, the waiter said. At this time, Akiko Tsukino suddenly came over and kissed Charlotte on the cheek. Then she said, Honey, eat quickly, or the food will get cold. Okay. Charlotte didn't talk to the waiter anymore, but he tipped the waiter $5. The waiter left with a smile on his face. Charlotte used his X-ray vision on the waiter's body, but he didn't find any weapons or spy equipment. He had to be careful because this restaurant was opposite the Mossad base. Who could guarantee that there were no agents of the Mossad in this restaurant? Charlotte's eyes moved to Building 48 across the road again. He activated his X-ray vision ability and searched for Yin Fo and Augustman of the FA organization. This time, he finally found Yin Fo and Augustman in an office on the 3rd floor. When he saw the two, someone had just followed an Israeli man into the office. Charlotte's left eye's vision penetrated the thick curtains and locked on the faces of the 3 people. He was ready to use lip reading to read the conversation between the 3 people. The language used by the 3 people was English. Mr. Kearns. As soon as the office door closed, Yin Fo went straight to the point. We received information that a mountain in the suburbs of Jerusalem suddenly collapsed. Is there such a thing? Kearns was stunned for a moment. Who did you hear this from? We are all in the same profession. Why ask such a meaningless question? Yin Fo said. Kearns shook his head. Perhaps there is such a thing, but I haven't received the relevant information yet. I will investigate and verify it later. Mr. Yin, can you tell me why you are so interested in this matter? You know what our purpose is. We represent the interests of the United States, and we are also working for the U.S. government. We are carrying out Mr. Williams's orders to investigate this matter, so please cooperate. Yin Fo said, Are you trying to use the CIA to suppress us? A hint of anger flashed in Kearns' eyes. Mr. Kearns, the usually quiet Augustman said, We definitely don't mean that. You know what the United States wants, and that is what you want. You have investigated for so many years without any results, and the U.S. government is the same. We should unite and cooperate in good faith. That is the only way to solve the problem. Charlotte is dead. Kearns said, You have your hands in our pockets, but you still want us to cooperate in good faith. You guys are really... Yin Fo interrupted Kearns. Mr. Kearns, let me show you something. What? Kearns said. Yin Fo took out a few photos from the inside pocket of his suit and handed them to Kearns. Charlotte's vision was from the bottom to the top. Kearns' hand blocked half of the photo, but even the incomplete half of the photo made him stunned on the spot. In the photo was a corpse. The deceased was a very strong black youth, covered in tattoos, and looked very fierce. His brain was cut open, revealing the brain tissue inside. However, it was not a normal person's brain. His brain tissue had shrunk to the size of a fist, and there was no moisture. There were signs of decay, but the other parts of his body did not have any signs of decay. Kearns looked at the remaining photos. Different corpse, same shrunken, rotten brain. Without thinking, Charlotte knew who did this. His heart was also filled with excitement. Zhu Xianyue is still alive. She is eating. She is still in the United States. From a human's point of view, he hoped that she was dead, but from a personal and emotional point of view, he hoped that she was alive. In short, every time he faced Zhu Xianyue or anything related to Zhu Xianyue, his heart was filled with contradictions. In the office, Kearns placed the photos on the desk. "Why are you showing me these photos of the corpses?" Yanfo said. "Mr. Kearns, didn't you notice that the cause of their death is very special?" "It is indeed very special. But what does it have to do with me? What does it have to do with Israel?" Kearns said. Yanfo said, "Recently, there have been hundreds of these deaths in the United States. At first, the relevant experts thought that it was a rare parasite that ate human brains to survive. But later, they overturned this judgment because the dead were all criminals, bad people, and drug dealers. The parasite would not only eat the bad people's brains. Someone murdered those people. Using this method to kill people?" Kearns said in surprise. "What weapon did the killer use?" "I don't know," Yanfo said, "but the CIA used the celestial system to analyze a clue, and this clue points directly to Charlotte. Isn't that person dead?" Kearns was even more surprised. "He is indeed dead, but the period of time when these deaths occurred was after he appeared in the United States. He is the only human in this world with a super strong evolution. The celestial system suspects that he created some kind of virus, a brand new virus. Even the United States can't find out what it is." Kearns frowned. In a restaurant opposite Building 48, Charlotte also frowned. He thought to himself, "Celestial system? I've never heard of it. The fact that it could analyze such a clue and drag me into it already shows its value. Does it know that I placed Xiaoqian in the CIA's intelligence network?" His heart was filled with worry. At this time, Yanfo said, "Mr. Kearns, the celestial system also gave a conclusion. I think you will be interested to know." "What conclusion?" Kearns said. "Charlotte's evolution and ability all came from the AE capsule, and the AE capsule came from Israel. Its source is here. Who can guarantee that the brand new virus hasn't been placed in Israel? Don't forget, he has been to Israel and had a firefight with the CIA. If you don't cooperate, you won't be able to share the information provided by the celestial system. When the brand new virus breaks out in Israel, it will be too late for you to cry," Yanfo said. It was undeniable that as the military advisor of the FA organization, his mouth was very powerful, more useful than the guns in many people's hands. Augustman said, "Cooperation is the right choice. Take us to that mountain to have a look, and we need to share the information you have gathered over the years." Kearns was silent for a moment. "Wait a moment. I will report to Mr. Igbala." With that, he left the office. Yanfo and Augustman looked at each other, but didn't say anything. In the office of the senior intelligence officer of the Mossad, if they carefully cleaned it, they would most likely find several bugs and micro cameras, right? These two were both old foxes, and they would rather communicate with their eyes than with their mouths. Charlotte rested his eyes for a while. He picked up the free egg tart and ate it while thinking about the next step of the plan. Israel doesn't have the capital to compete with the United States. If the Americans use some new virus to force the Mossad to cooperate, the Americans will definitely get what they want. Yanfo and Augustman will go to that mountain. Should I give them some gifts? Akiko Tsukino lowered her voice. "Boss, we have been here for too long. We should go, or else we will be suspected." Charlotte hesitated. "Stay for another 3 minutes. If Kearns didn't return in 3 minutes, he and Akiko Tsukino would leave. Akiko Tsukino nodded. 2 minutes later, Kearns returned to his office. Our leader has agreed. Come with me. I will take you to the mountain. Yin Fo smiled. Thank you. In the dining room, Charlotte got up. Let's go. Akiko Tsukino took Charlotte's arm. Chapter 10:23. A motorcade set off from 48 Holy Cross Road, heading toward the eastern suburbs of Jerusalem. The motorcade consisted of 4 Desert Hunter armed SUVs and a Mercedes-Benz bulletproof sedan. In the military SUVs sat Israel's most elite special forces, the Sword of David Special Forces, while in the sedan sat Mossad agents. The total number of people in the motorcade was more than 30, and any one of them was an expert who could take on 10 people at once. Just as the motorcade left Holy Cross Road, an ordinary Ford Raptor pickup truck also headed toward the eastern suburbs of Jerusalem from another street. There were 5 people in the 2 Ford Raptor pickup trucks, Charlotte and the 4 members of the Zodiac Squad. The driver was Siamu from Iraq, but he looked like a Mexican. Boss, should we follow them? Siamu asked. Akiko Tsukino, Yelena, and Angumi Khan all looked at Charlotte, waiting for him to make a decision. It was not a simple decision to go or not, but a decision that concerned life and death. This was because the people who had just left 48 Holy Cross Road were equivalent to 300 professional warriors, and there were only 5 of them on their side. What's more, the Mossad could call for air support in a few minutes. Once the battle started, there would be no turning back. Charlotte was well aware of the situation, so he was very conflicted. He wanted to kill Yin Fo and Augustman, and this was a great opportunity. But once he opened fire, it would mean an overwhelming pursuit, which was tantamount to mutual destruction. The thoughts of going or not going collided in his mind, and after more than 10 seconds, Charlotte made a decision. Stop the car. Siamu stepped on the brakes of the Ford Raptor pickup truck. More than 30 people left the Mossad base, said Charlotte. I've observed them. There are 28 field agents and 8 special forces from the Mossad. With so many armed men leaving Mossad's base, this is our best chance to attack 48 Holy Cross Road. Huh? Angumi Khan laughed with an exaggerated expression. Boss, attacking the Mossad's headquarters, whether we succeed or not, will definitely cause a sensation all over the world. The conversation between Yin Fo and Kins flashed through Charlotte's mind. He said, no, 48 Holy Cross Road isn't Mossad's headquarters. It's just a very important branch base. Boss, are you sure? Siamu asked. Charlotte said, I'm sure. We had overlooked the obvious fact that this was Jerusalem, the Holy Land to the Arabs. Israel established a state on this land and set Jerusalem as its capital, but their important government institutions weren't here. This was for security reasons. The Mossad's headquarters is equivalent to the CIA's Langley headquarters. It's extremely important, so it can't be here. Siamu slapped his forehead. I didn't think of such a simple problem. Xiaolei continued. Therefore, a subbase has sent out 28 field agents, as well as 8 special forces soldiers to help guard this place. There aren't many people in this subbase who can fight anymore. This is a very good opportunity. Yelena said worriedly, Boss, you have to think carefully. This is Jerusalem. Once we open fire, the Israeli Rapid Response Force will arrive here in a few minutes. We won't have a chance to escape. Charlotte smiled. We won't open fire. Then what do we do? Akiko Tsukino couldn't help but be curious. She was also attracted to Charlotte's calmness and wisdom on the battlefield. Charlotte looked at Siamu and said, Siamu, use your intelligence system in the Middle East immediately. I'll give you $20 million. Can you ask those people in the Gaza Strip to create some conflicts in the border area? Then ask them to arrange a safe passage for us to retreat. After we finish the retreat, give them another $20 million. $40 million? Long live Allah, Siamu said excitedly. So much money can make those guys do anything, let alone fight their mortal enemy. Charlotte looked at Yelena and said, Yelena, I want to find a fiber optic at 48 Holy Cross Road within 20 minutes. Wait for my signal and cut it off. Yelena nodded. Charlotte looked at Angumi Khan. Angumi Khan, you have to find the underground gas pipeline of Holy Cross Road within half an hour. Then choose 3 points that won't hurt ordinary people and put a time bomb. Each time bomb has to be set for half an hour. After you put the bomb, drive around this area and come back here at the 25th minute to pick us up and leave. Angumi Khan nodded. No problem. Charlotte looked at the multifunction watch on his hand. It's 9 now. The countdown starts at 9:10. Akiko Tsukino asked, what about me? Charlotte said, of course you're going with me. We're going to enter 48 Holy Cross Road and rescue the prisoner. A smile appeared on Akiko Tsukino's face. She knew that Charlotte had asked her to follow him to be responsible for the most important part of this operation because of her characteristics. She was happy to be working with him, no matter the reason. A minute later, 4 people got out of the Ford Raptor. Yelena walked quickly, observing the telecommunications fiber optic lines as she walked. Saimu was also walking quickly, making a phone call as he walked. Charlotte brought Akiko Tsukino into 48 Holy Cross Road. He was carrying a backpack, which contained a hacker's computer, weapons, and some other equipment. Akiko Tsukino was also carrying a backpack, which contained more weapons and ammunition. She didn't bring her samurai sword, but the ninja equipment for assassination was with her. Angumi Khan drove the Ford Raptor to another street. As he drove, he looked at the gas pipeline in the residential area. Charlotte walked as he observed the entry point he wanted. His observation had the quality of perspective. A few minutes later, when he was about 100 meters away from 48 Holy Cross Road, he stopped in his tracks and walked toward the 2-story building. It was a very ordinary residential building. The door of the building was locked. Charlotte walked to the door, used a steel wire to open the lock, and then opened the door and walked in. Akiko Tsukino followed. Guard the door. No matter who comes in, knock him out, Charlotte said. Akiko Tsukino nodded and stood by the door. Charlotte took off his backpack, opened it, took out the hacker's computer, and began to work. About 2 minutes later, he entered the Jerusalem City Sanitation Department system. After another minute, a blueprint appeared on the monitor of the hacker's computer. It was the pipeline diagram of the underground drainage system of 48 Holy Cross Road and several surrounding streets. Looking at the 2D pipeline diagram on the monitor, Charlotte's mind was the 3D model of the real world, where the pipeline led, how many manhole covers were on the ground, the size of the sewer, and so on, were all under his control. Finally, his eyes locked on a shaded area on the 2D pipeline diagram. The shaded area was facing the ancient building of 48 Holy Cross Road. The corner of his mouth also showed a hint of a smile. 48 Holy Cross Road is holding very important prisoners, and they are imprisoned for several years or even 10 years. Would a place like 48 Holy Cross Road not have a dungeon? If there is a dungeon, then there must be a drainage system. Otherwise, wouldn't the excrement of the prisoners be picked out by the Mossad agents? After looking at the blueprint again, Charlotte closed the hacker's computer, put it into the equipment bag, and said, Akiko, let's go change clothes. Change clothes? Akiko Tsukino looked at Charlotte curiously. She clearly didn't understand Charlotte's motive. Charlotte didn't explain. He quickly walked into a room and opened a closet. In the closet, there were sanitation workers' uniforms, one new and one old. He threw the new sanitation worker's uniform to Akiko Tsukino, took the old sanitation worker's uniform, and said to Akiko Tsukino, put it on. Akiko Tsukino more or less understood Charlotte's motive. She took off her backpack and took off her jeans and jacket. She wore a set of white-combed cotton underwear. It was thin and close to her body, and it felt very transparent. As a result, there were some color changes in the white magnolia scene. There was a mysterious black, and there was a mysterious pink. It was hazy and extremely tempting. Charlotte only took a glance and then looked away. He had to be 120% focused on the action in front of him. He couldn't afford to be distracted. Akiko Tsukino didn't do anything to tempt Charlotte. She quickly put on the sanitation worker's uniform that Charlotte gave her. Just as she put on the clothes, Charlotte, who had already put on the sanitation worker's uniform, found 2 sets of portable oxygen supply devices from a toolbox. He gave one of them to Akiko Tsukino. Akiko Tsukino was very curious why Charlotte knew this place like the back of his hand, even though it was his first time here. Not only did he know the owner's occupation, where the clothes were kept, but he even knew that there was a manhole cover in the backyard. However, she didn't ask. She had begun to get used to Charlotte's sense of mystery. After putting on the portable oxygen supply device, Charlotte carried the equipment bag and left the room. Akiko Tsukino followed him. She thought that Charlotte was going to take her away from the small building. She didn't expect that Charlotte would take her to the backyard behind the small building. There were many flowers and plants planted in the backyard, and there was a cast iron manhole cover on the ground. Charlotte used a tool to pry open the manhole cover and then went down the iron ladder. Akiko Tsukino also entered the sewer. She was the last to enter and grabbed the manhole cover to return it to its original position. It was dark in the sewer, and the dirty sofa had a strong stench. The portable oxygen supply device that Charlotte found played a key role. Without these 2 portable oxygen supply devices, people would not be able to breathe in such an environment. Charlotte turned on the tactical flashlight and waded through the water. The small building was only 100 meters away from 48 Holy Cross Road, but he knew that he had to walk at least 300 meters. Hurry up. After adapting to the environment, Charlotte crouched and ran. Akiko Tsukino also ran. Her full bosom swayed in the darkness, and the spectacular and beautiful scenery was a waste. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.